Chapter 1126, Grand Constellation Finger Teacher. Division Head Wei and Xiao Bo were startled. They had only left for the trial of inner breaths for a moment, so how in the world did so many combat masters of the inner breath division suddenly become Sun Shi's students? Didn't they acknowledge their teacher a little? No, way too fast. Division Head Wei was utterly confused by the twist in the situation before him. He could not comprehend what was going on at all. While combat masters were expected to obey the orders of their superiors, the relationship between division heads and the combat masters under them was similar to that of brothers. There was not a particularly strict hierarchy between them. It was for this reason that Shi Hao and Xiao Bo had expressed themselves rather casually before Division Head Wei, not restraining themselves in the least. For a teacher to suddenly pop out before those brothers all of a sudden. He had been intending to bring Sun Shi into the inner breath division, but all of a sudden, the latter had become everyone's teacher. What the heck was going on? Just as he was wondering what kind of sorcery Sun Shi had cast over them, the young man suddenly shook his head and said, "There's really no need for this. Please rise. The path to cultivation is not one that should be walked in isolation. Only through trading insights and learning from one another will we be able to advance further. It's sufficient for us to speak to one another as peers, there's no need for you to address me as your teacher." It was just a simple lecture from him, so he did not think that they would suddenly acknowledge him as their teacher. This had left him in an awkward position. Sun Shi's teachings are direct, and they point directly toward the essence of cultivation. I have benefited greatly from your guidance. Given so, it's only right for me to address you as my teacher. In fact, I am honored to have you as my teacher. Shi Hao said. As a renowned genius of the Combat Master Hall, it was inevitable that he was a prideful person. Under normal circumstances, it would be hard to say whether even the Hall Master himself would be able to win his respect, and yet, he was showing such deep reverence for the man before him. Not only did the other party enlighten him on the problems in his cultivation, more importantly, the guidance he had offered was truly full of wisdom, clearing the shadows veiling his eyes. As long as he absorbed all of the knowledge, he was certain that he would be able to advance his Jinqi capacity significantly to an unfathomable level. Such valuable knowledge, and the other party had imparted it to him without any reservations. Just this generosity in itself was sufficient to make him willingly address the other party as his teacher. This was how he felt deep in his heart as well. Indeed, Sun Shi. We earnestly regard you as our teacher, so please don't turn us down. With the knowledge that you have imparted to us, we'll surely be able to advance our cultivation swiftly. Clearing the examination will be a walk in the park. The others quickly nodded in agreement. Division Head Wei was completely stunned. It was a moment ago that he had wondered whether Sun Shi had used some kind of underhanded method to force the combat masters in the inner breath division to become his students, but upon seeing this sight, it was apparent that it was an earnest gesture from the depths of combat masters' hearts. He had only left for the trial of inner breath for a moment. Just what in the world did Sun Shi lecture on that won him the respect of so many people within this short period of time? All right then. Seeing that the combat masters were determined, even though Zhang Xian was a little troubled by the matter, he eventually relented and nodded in agreement. Just as he had said, he only regarded it as an exchange, and it was with this notion in mind that he had conducted a lecture for them. It was never his intention to accept them as his students, so he could not help but feel a little lost when all of them suddenly addressed him as their teacher. It seemed like being too outstanding was a trouble as well. No matter where he went, everyone just wanted to take him as their teacher. How problematic. Division Head Wei, you have returned. Alright, let's head to the martial arts division then. Just as Zhang Xian was a little unsure of what he should do at the moment, he suddenly saw Division Head Wei walking over, so he quickly grasped this opportunity to free himself from this slightly awkward situation. Alright then. Division Head Wei nodded blankly. Without saying too much, he began leading Zhang Xian toward the martial arts division. The martial arts division was not far from the inner breath division. It was only a short walk before they arrived at their destination. Division Head Feng is a good friend of mine. We have known each other for more than 300 years now. As long as I make a request on your behalf, he should allow you to browse through his collection, Division Head Wei said with a smile. Division Head Feng used to be a renowned master teacher of the Qingyuan Empire Master Teacher Pavilion. He was skilled in all kinds of battle techniques, and his fighting prowess was terrifying. Eventually, Hall Master Xing personally invited him over, offering him the position as the head of the martial arts division so that he could help groom generation after generation of combat masters. Division Head Wei had already been acquainted with him before the other party joined the Combat Master Hall, and their relationship had only gotten closer since then. A combat master stepped forward and said, reporting to Division Head Wei, "Our division head went out a moment ago, and he hasn't returned yet." "He hasn't returned yet?" Division Head Wei frowned. "I'm afraid so." The combat master lowered his head apologetically. "When he returns, tell him that there's something I need his help on." Since Division Head Feng was not around, there was nothing they could do. Thus, Division Head Wei could only shake his head in disappointment. "I'll relay your message to him, Division Head Wei," the combat master replied with a smile. "Actually, if Division Head Wei is seeking to borrow our division head's book collection, there's no need to wait for our division head to return. Our division head has stored most of the battle technique and cultivation technique manuals he has collected in the trial of martial arts. As long as one successfully clears the trial, one will be granted access to that collection for as long as one wants." "Trial of martial arts?" Division Head Wei asked. He rarely had time to come over to the martial arts division, so he was unsure of the various systems in place for it. On top of that, he did not recall the martial arts division having a trial in the past. "That's right. In the trial of martial arts, the challenger will first pick a battle technique from among several hundred, and as long as you are able to defeat the puppet left behind by our division head while using the battle technique, you will be considered to have cleared the trial," the combat master explained. Division Head Wei nodded in realization. In a sense, it was a system that was strikingly similar to their inner breath divisions. One should learn other battle techniques only after one had achieved a certain level of mastery in the battle technique one was currently practicing. After all, even if one were to learn a huge array of battle techniques, it would be completely meaningless if one could not use them effectively in battle. Sun Shi. Division Head Wei turned to seek Zhang Xian's opinion. "I don't mind giving the trial of martial arts a try," Zhang Xian replied with a smile. Since he could access the books just by clearing the trial, there was no need for him to owe a favor to Division Head Wei over this minor matter. "All right, I'll lead the both of you over then." The combat master smiled before leading the way forward. Not too long later, they arrived at a vast hall. Similar to the entrance of the trial of inner breath, it was crowded with combat masters. Most of them had grim expressions on their faces. This is the trial of martial arts. The wall over there lists the names of the many battle techniques for the trial. As long as one is able to achieve major accomplishment in any one of them, one will be qualified to challenge the puppet our division head left behind. After defeating the puppet, one will be able to enter the library and assess our division head's collection of books. Sun Shi, are there any familiar battle techniques on the list that you see? If there are any, tell me and I'll register you for the trial, the combat master said. In the short talk they had while walking over, he learned that it was not Division Head Wei who wanted to browse through the books but the young man before him. However, for the young man to be accompanied by a division head, he could not help but wonder what kind of identity the young man had. "Let me take a look." Zhang Xian nodded as he turned his gaze to the wall. There were all kinds of battle techniques listed on it: Thousand Leaves Palm, Fist of Red Thread, Asterism Finger. There was a huge variety, and making a swift count, there were actually more than 200 techniques listed. There are so many of them. Zhang Xian was astonished. It's our division head's hobby to collect such manuals. Listed up there are all of the common Saint-tier battle techniques in Qingyuan Empire. Is there a technique that Sun Shi specializes in? The combat master asked. This. Zhang Xian suddenly felt a little awkward. This is the first time I have heard of these battle techniques. I haven't practiced even one of them before. These battle techniques were unique to Combat Master Hall and the Qingyuan Empire, and considering that it hadn't even been a day since Zhang Xian arrived here, there was no way he could have heard of any of these battle techniques before, let alone practice them. The Combat Master was taken aback. All of the easier Saint-tier battle techniques in the Qingyuan Empire are listed up there. As a Saint 1 Dan Pinnacle cultivator, Sun Shi has never practiced any of them before. Of the 200 or so battle techniques, 180 of them were straightforward and easy to master. Yet, to actually not know a single one of them, just how weak was he? I have only cultivated one Saint-tier battle technique so far, but it isn't among the 200 techniques up there, Zhang Xian replied with an embarrassed smile. Most of his stronger battle techniques had come from the Hongyuan Empire, but none of them had reached Saint-tier yet. Only the heavenly demon Great Sorrow Palm, which he had learned from the ancient domain, had reached Saint-tier, but even so, he thought that there were too many flaws in it, so he had not practiced it anymore afterwards. You have only learned one Saint-tier battle technique? And it isn't within the list? The combat master glanced at Zhang Xian with an inconspicuous hint of disdain in his eyes. He had thought that the other party was a genius from some powerful clan, but who would have thought that he was an inexperienced greenhorn instead? In the martial arts division, combat masters who hadn't mastered at least 3 Saint-tier battle techniques would not even dare to walk with their heads up. That's right, Zhang Xian replied. Following which, he pondered for a moment before adding, do you have any of the manuals for the battle techniques listed on the wall? I'll quickly learn one before challenging the trial of martial arts. He might not have learned any of the battle techniques listed on the wall, but it was not a problem at all. He could always just learn on the spot. You'll quickly learn one before challenging the trial of martial arts. The combat master nearly burst into laughter. If it was not for the fact that the young man had been brought there by division head Wei, he would have berated the other party at this very moment. Saint-tier battle techniques might have been commonplace in the martial arts division, but any single one of them could easily be considered a trump card in a battle in the Qingyuan Empire. It was true that most of the listed battle techniques were straightforward, but it would still take at least several years of practice before one could achieve major accomplishment in any one of the techniques and challenge the puppet. Even the more talented geniuses of their martial arts division would require at least 2 years of practice before they dared enter the trial of martial arts. Yet, this fellow sure spoke big words. It sounded as if he would challenge the trial right after learning it on the spot. Ignorance sure emboldened guts. Pushing his displeasure back down, the combat master advised patiently, I understand your desire to clear the trial of martial arts, but mastering a battle technique isn't as easy as you think it is. Regardless of the battle technique, it will require diligent practice over numerous years before one can even come close to reaching major accomplishment. Thank you for your advice, I appreciate that. However, I think that it's worth a try. If you have a manual of any of the listed battle techniques, I hope that you can lend it to me for a moment, Zhang Xian replied. If he could compile the Saint-tier battle technique given by the other party with his current collection in the Library of Heaven's Path to create a Heaven's Path battle technique, he could still consider cultivating it. Otherwise, there was no way he would waste his effort on it. Alright then. The combat master was going to fly to a rage after seeing how obstinate Zhang Xian was on the matter, but noting that division head Wei was by the side, he could only suppress his rage. Flicking his wrist, he took out a book. This is the manual for Grand Constellation Finger that I am currently practicing. It's among the 200 battle techniques on the wall, but I'll have to warn you that it might be a little difficult for you. I had to spend 7 years on it before I was able to reach minor accomplishment, the combat master explained with a hint of pride on his face. You took 7 years to reach minor accomplishment in the Grand Constellation Finger? Division head Wei suddenly thought of something, and his eyebrows shot up. Wait a moment, are you the genius of the martial arts division whom division head Feng often speaks about, Jiao Tan? When they were looking for Division Head Feng, he had been the only combat master who happened to be in the vicinity, so they had approached him out of convenience to ask for the latter's whereabouts. As such, they were not aware of the other party's name. However, upon hearing of the name of the battle technique and the duration the other party had taken to cultivate it to minor accomplishment, Division Head Wei suddenly recalled this matter. The Grand Constellation Finger was definitely the most difficult to master out of the 200 battle techniques listed on the wall, as well as the most powerful one. Even Division Head Feng had required 23 years before he could achieve minor accomplishment in the technique, but the other party had only taken 7 years. His talent was truly frightening. Indeed, that's me. Combat Master Jiao Tan nodded with an air of dignity around him. Chapter 1127, 11 Breaths, I See. Upon learning that the other party was the famed genius of the martial arts division, a figure who stood toe-to-toe with Shi Hao, Division Head Wei nodded before turning to Zhang Xian. Sun Shi, let me get another battle technique for you. Mastering the Grand Constellation Finger won't be easy. Even among the 200 battle techniques listed on the wall, it's considered one of the harder ones. Considering that Division Head Feng was not a combat master and didn't receive the systematic training that they underwent before, it was not surprising that he had taken 2 decades to achieve minor accomplishment in the technique. However, Jiao Tan was the most talented individual of the martial arts division of the current generation, and yet, he had still taken 7 years to reach minor accomplishment. It was no wonder the Grand Constellation Finger was famed as one of the hardest battle techniques to master in the martial arts division. Zhang Xian shook his head as he casually took the manual of the Grand Constellation Finger from Jiao Tan's hands and flipped through it. There's no need to go through so much trouble, I'll just practice this one. To him, as long as he could compile a Heaven's Path battle technique, it mattered not which of the 200 battle techniques he practiced. Knowing that he would draw hostility from the other party if he attempted to dissuade him too much, Division Head Wei conceded. All right then. If you wish to give up at any point in time, feel free to tell me. I'll bring you another battle technique. Often, a cultivator had to try practicing the battle technique themselves before they would truly understand how difficult it was. Once the other party stumbled on the technique, failing to even achieve novice mastery quickly, he would finally understand how difficult the Grand Constellation Finger was. Clearly, Jiao Tan also harbored the same thoughts in mind. He stared at the conceited young man before him intently, waiting to see the look of desperation on the other party's face once he realized that he could not comprehend the content of the manual. However, his expectations did not come to be. Instead of desperation, he found himself looking at a face frowning in disgust. What do you mean by that? Jiao Tan questioned in displeasure. It was one thing for the other party to be unable to comprehend the manual, but what was with the look of disgust on his face? It was as if the other party thought that he was too good for their battle technique. Zhang Xian hesitated for a moment before replying, "It's nothing." After which, he turned his attention back to the manual in his hands, and a moment later, he sighed deeply and said, "Forget it. I guess there's no choice." With a look of resignation reminiscent of one who was ready to face death, Zhang Xian closed his eyes. You. Seeing how the other party's expression grew even more exaggerated than before, Jiao Tan felt so wrathful that he could have blown up on the spot. The Grand Constellation Finger might not be a top-notch battle technique, but it was at least one of the stronger techniques in the martial arts division. Normal cultivators would find it profound and difficult to cultivate, but they would still be honored to learn it. Yet, this fellow had a look of complete repulsion on his face, as if a fly had entered his mouth. That was really a little too much. Jiao Tan harumphed coldly. What's with your poor attitude? Even if you can't comprehend the intricacies of the Grand Constellation Finger, surely you need not act in such a disrespectful manner. But before he could finish his words, a powerful aura carrying an air of antiquity and vastness suddenly burst forth from the young man before him. Following which, the young man suddenly raised his right hand and tapped at the space before him with his forefinger. TZ La. A burst of jinqi tore across air, creating a deafening, piercing sound reminiscent of a piece of paper being torn into two. One could vaguely see stars rotating around the young man's fingertip, as if he had the world in his hands. The Grand Constellation Finger was a technique created by an elder of the Combat Master Hall more than 10,000 years ago. That elder had carefully observed the movements of celestial bodies, and emulating the positioning of the stars with his jinqi, he had created this finger art. This technique was feared not only for its powerful physical might. The finger art carried the vastness of the universe within it as well, and those facing it would feel as if they were traversing through boundless space, exerting great pressure on their souls. As such, it was extremely difficult to guard against this attack. However, it was also for the same reason that it was extremely difficult for ordinary cultivators to comprehend. There were even some who had dedicated their entire lives to it, only to remain oblivious to the power of the stars on their deathbed. Jiao Tan's initial intention of offering the Grand Constellation Finger to Sun Shi was because he could not stand the other party's arrogance and wanted to teach him some humility. However, upon seeing the burst of jinqi from the other party's finger, his eyes narrowed, and his body trembled. This is novice? He had thought that the other party was just putting on an act in order to spare himself from the embarrassment of being unable to comprehend the battle technique, and yet, just after shutting his eyes for an instant, he had actually managed to achieve novice mastery. One must know that even Jiao Tan himself had taken an entire year to reach novice mastery. Tzzzzzzzzzz. While Jiao Tan was astonished beyond measure, the jinqi gathering on the young man's finger was swiftly growing stronger and stronger, to the point where a deep rumbling sound could be heard from the sheer accumulation of power. In that instant, Jiao Tan felt as if the entire room had turned dark, and the stars around him threatened to fall upon him. This is initiate? Jiao Tan gulped down a mouthful saliva as his face turned completely pale. The biggest hurdle in the Grand Constellation Finger lay in the initial phase, where one had to comprehend the power of the stars in order to draw upon the might of the technique. Once one overcame this challenge, the subsequent cultivation of the technique would be a little easier and faster. But even so, it was not supposed to be so fast. How long did the other party take? 10 breaths? 5 breaths? Or only 2 breaths? A tap of his finger, and the other party was already at initiate. Before he could even begin to process what was going on, the other party was already at initiate. Is this even humanly possible? Jiao Tan felt his throat turn dry. He quickly turned his gaze to ask Division Head Wei just what kind of background the young man came from to be able to grasp the Grand Constellation Finger so easily, only to see Division Head Wei staring at the young man with bulging eyes as well. Clearly, Division Head Wei had not expected the young man to be able to advance from novice to initiate that quickly either. After all, this was something that defied common sense. Division Head Wei. Fearing that he would interrupt the cultivating Sun Shi, Jiao Tan opted to send a telepathic message over instead. Division Head Wei was jolted out of his shock. Has Sun Shi really not practiced the Grand Constellation Finger in the past? Jiao Tan asked doubtfully. Recalling the various incredible deeds the young man had achieved earlier, Division Head Wei contemplated for a moment before replying. That should be the case. There's no need for someone of his caliber to lie about something as minor as this. A collaboration between the Hall Master and 2 division heads, and Sun Shi was still able to escape unscathed. Not only so, he even managed to find an opportunity to tap into the formation of the Heart Division to subdue them. And just earlier, he had destroyed all 10 stone walls in the trial of inner breath with a single palm strike. Surely a person of such great capability would not need to lie just to inflate his ego. It was more likely that the Grand Constellation Finger was simply easy to him. If he has not practiced the Grand Constellation Finger before and really managed to reach initiate within just a few breaths, won't he catch up to my 7 years of effort and reach minor accomplishment in just a single day? Jiao Tan uttered with widened eyes as his lips quivered in horror. Surely not. There's a huge rift between initiate and minor accomplishment, so it shouldn't be possible for anyone to do it so quickly. Ah! Halfway through his words, Division Head Wei abruptly exclaimed in shock. At this point, the young man had straightened his arm, and a vortex reminiscent of a revolving stellar river appeared at his fingertip. Just looking at that incredible mass of power rotating on the fingertip could easily leave one lightheaded. Minor accomplishment. The duo fearfully took 2 steps back. It was just a moment ago that Division Head Wei had said that the other party would not reach minor accomplishment that day, but the next moment, he was forced to swallow his words. Who? Upon achieving minor accomplishment, Zhang Xian opened his eyes. He looked at the vortex of power gathered on his fingertip and sighed deeply before turning his gaze toward Jiao Tan. Does the trial of martial arts only open to those who have achieved major accomplishment in their battle technique? Jiao Tan was not too sure why the other party was asking such a question, but he swiftly nodded in response. That's right. Only one who had achieved major accomplishment in any of the 200 battle techniques would stand a chance in the trial of martial arts. Over time, this had become the prerequisite to challenging the trial. Jiao Tan was just about to explain this matter to the young man when the latter sighed deeply and said, I see. Following which, the young man closed his eyes once more. What? Jiao Tan's cheeks twitched. You aren't thinking of pushing for a breakthrough to major accomplishment right now, are you? The grand constellation finger is highly demanding on Jinqi, and a forceful breakthrough without prior preparation could easily result in severe internal injuries. Once again, before Jiao Tan could finish his words, the young man raised his finger and tapped on the space before him once more. Voila! The air in the area was suddenly compressed tightly together. All of a sudden, Jiao Tan felt as if he was standing in the middle of the universe with innumerable stars around him. Each and every one of the stars was flying toward him with incredible momentum, threatening to crush his body into smithereens. Domain of stars. Jiao Tan's body trembled intensely. This is the level of mastery exceeding major accomplishment, consummation. The mastery of a battle technique could be divided into 5 levels: novice, initiate, minor accomplishment, major accomplishment, and consummation. It was just a moment ago that he had said that reaching major accomplishment would be nigh impossible, and the following moment, the other party managed to reach consummation with such ease. It seemed like from the moment he came into contact with the manual till he cultivated to consummation, all in all, only a dozen or so seconds had passed. And he, the most talented individual of the martial arts division, had spent 7 years only to reach minor accomplishment. An overwhelming sense of defeat left him feeling as if he would explode on the spot. There would be no damage if there was not any comparison. Not knowing that his short moment of cultivation had scared Division Head Wei and Jiao Tan to the point that they were going to spew blood at any moment, Zhang Xian opened his eyes. Truthfully, if it was not for the collection of books within, he would never have lowered himself to cultivating the grand constellation finger. Even after compiling it with the finger arts in his library of Heaven's Path, there were still 5 flaws in it. He had never thought that he would cultivate such a flawed battle technique in his life. It was for this reason that he had such a conflicted expression on his face. It was simply too hard to swallow this finger art. This must surely be the darkest stain in his history of cultivation. However, it could not be helped. He had to clear the trial of martial arts to find more Saint Tu Dan cultivation techniques in order to achieve a breakthrough. Otherwise, who knew how much longer it would take him? It was fortunate that none of these flaws demanded a catalyst for him to cultivate the battle technique, or else he would have been in deep trouble. Shaking away the frustrations in his mind, Zhang Xian said, I'm done. Combat Master Jiao Tan, I will have to trouble you to register me for the trial of martial arts. Most of the flaws were regarding the tearing the cultivator's meridians upon the execution of the technique, putting the cultivator in excruciating pain. However, with Zhang Xian's Heaven's Path Jinqi, he could heal those tears swiftly, so it did not pose a problem. In any case, he only required it to clear the trial. At most, he would just avoid using it in the future. Why yes. Jiao Tan finally recovered from his shock. Cowering back slightly, he quickly left the area. Not too long later, he returned. Sun Shi, I have negotiated with the combat masters in charge and gotten you the next slot for the trial. A large crowd would challenge the trial of martial arts each day, but the number that would eventually pass the trial was very low. Considering that the young man had been brought over by division head Wei himself, and he had already achieved the level of consummation for the Grand Constellation Finger, it was not anything much to let him go first for the trial. Thank you for your help. Zhang Xian clasped his fist in gratitude before following Jiao Tan forward. The door to the trial happened to open at this moment, and a young man walked out with a gloomy expression on his face. With just a look, it was obvious that he had failed the examination. Sun Shi, this way. Jiao Tan gestured into the open doorway. Zhang Xian walked in, and in the blink of an eye, he had already disappeared from everyone's sight. Jiao Tan, just what is that fellow's background that you would intervene in his stead to give him priority in the queue? I don't know either. Jiao Tan shook his head. You don't know? Then, surely you do know what battle technique he is going to be challenging, right? The combat master asked again. Based on the reported battle technique, it was possible to deduce the other party's background. He's challenging the Grand Constellation Finger. Jiao Tan said. Grand Constellation Finger? Isn't that the battle technique you are cultivating at the moment? I heard that battle technique is incredibly difficult to master. Even someone as talented as you took 7 years in order to reach minor accomplishment. For that fellow to dare challenge that battle technique, has he already achieved major accomplishment in it? But judging from his appearance, he doesn't look old enough. The combat master from before frowned. Given his young age, how long could he possibly have cultivated the technique? Probably. It was intended as a hypothetical question, but Jiao Tan happened to have the answer to it. With a bitter smile, he said, 12 breaths. Ah, no, it should be 11 breaths. Chapter 1128, Division Head Feng's Misery Who? As soon as Zhang Xian stepped through the door, a puppet at the very end of the room stood up. Its appearance looked no different from a real person. With its snowy hair and beard, it resembled a human in his 60s. Most likely, it's constructed in the form of Division Head Feng, Zhang Xian deduced. Division Head Feng was probably a celestial designer as well, which was not surprising since he came from the Master-Teacher Pavilion in the first place. Otherwise, it should have been impossible for him to craft such a lifelike puppet. If Zhang Xian had not known in advance, he would have really thought that the figure before him was a true human. The battle technique you have chosen is the Grand Constellation Finger. If you are able to withstand my attack with just the Grand Constellation Finger, you will have cleared the trial. Otherwise, you'll have to leave and try again next time, the puppet said in an impassive tone. All right. Zhang Xian nodded as he took a step forward. Pitting the same battle technique against a puppet of the same cultivation realm, even if he did not use his Eye of Insight and Library of Heaven's Path, he was still absolutely confident that he would be the one to emerge victorious in the very end. Reporting to Hall Master Xing, it appears that Division Head Wei has taken Sun Laoshi to the Martial Arts Division. Hall Master Xing and the others had led Elder Qi to the Inner Breath Division, but Zhang Xian and Division Head Wei were nowhere to be found. Thus, he had turned his sight toward Shi Hao, and he soon received his answer. Hall Master Xing frowned. What are they doing at the Martial Arts Division? I'm not too sure either. Shi Hao shook his head. Hold on a moment. Did you just address Sun Shi as Sun Laoshi? The sharp division head Liao swiftly noticed that there was something amiss with Shi Hao's words. Addressing Sun Chang as Sun Shi was a respectful way to refer to master teachers, but Sun Laoshi meant something even deeper than that. It was a way to address one who had enlightened them greatly in their path. Yes, Sun Laoshi has given us invaluable pointers in our cultivation, we are extremely grateful to him. Shi Hao nodded. This. Hall Master Xing and the others glanced at one another and frowned. It was one thing for a spirit awakener to provide pointers to combat masters, but to win the respect of so many of them and have them acknowledge him as their teacher simultaneously. Just what in the world had happened? Soon, upon clarifying the situation, the trio was dumbfounded. Destroying the trial of inner breath with a single palm strike and subduing Sure Hao with just a finger. Just how much Shinchi did Sun Sure possess? Let's head to the martial arts division to take a look, said Hall Master Xing, intrigued, before quickly making his way over to the martial arts division. Soon, he arrived at the entrance of the trial of martial arts. You're all here. At this moment, Division Head Wei suddenly noticed the old man standing alongside Hall Master Xing and Division Head Liao, and his eyes lit up as he quickly clasped his fist respectfully. Elder Qi, you are fine. Elder Qi nodded. Where is Sun Sure? Ah, he just entered the trial, Division Head Wei replied with a smile. Trial? Hall Master Xing frowned. Sun Sure is trying to find some St. Tu Dan cultivation technique manuals, but there aren't any suited for him in the inner breath division. Thus, we came over to look for Division Head Feng, but he happened to not be around. So, Sun Sure decided to challenge the trial of martial arts so as to gain access to Division Head Feng's collection of books. Division Head Wei swiftly summarized the happenings. Recalling when they faced the young man earlier and the astounding sight they had witnessed at the inner breath division, Hall Master Xing stroked his beard and remarked, with his strength, clearing the trial shouldn't be a problem. A genius of Sun Sure's caliber would not face any trouble clearing the trial of martial arts. There was no need to worry about him. Hall Master Xing continued after a brief pause. Speaking of which, didn't Division Head Feng return to the martial arts division right after our conference? He usually spends his time cooped up within the martial arts division, and there have been no reports saying that he has sneaked out like the others. It's a little weird that he isn't around here. Except for collecting new cultivation techniques and battle technique manuals, Division Head Feng's greatest hobby was to isolate himself in his living quarters to study battle techniques. In fact, there were many times when Hall Master Xing had invited him to various formal occasions, only to be rejected for this reason. Considering how he did not defect to the Xianxian faction like Division Head Zhou and Division Head Wu, it seemed a little bizarre for him not to be in the martial arts division. I was also wondering the same thing, Division Head Wei said. He had been a little perplexed by the matter when he heard from Jiao Ten that Division Head Feng wasn't around. However, out of respect for Division Head Feng's privacy, he had chosen not to inquire too deeply. Old Feng actually willingly came out of his den. Why do I find that inconceivable? Wait a moment, could it be? In the middle of his words, Division Head Liao suddenly recalled a matter and froze. What's wrong? Noting that Division Head Liao had thought of something, Hall Master Xing and the others quickly turned their attention to him. As you know, I have a close relationship with Old Feng. He regularly comes over to seek my help in clearing his inner demons. On one of these occasions, he told me that he has a bizarre habit. Division Head Liao spoke with twitching lips. From time to time, he hides in the trial of martial arts and pretends to be the puppet so as to assess his combat masters personally. Pretends to be the puppet? Everyone was stunned. They had not expected to hear such words. That's right. The trial of martial arts is usually conducted by the puppet crafted by Old Feng, but facing multiple combat masters every single day, it inevitably accumulates damage and breaks down from time to time. In such cases, he suppresses his cultivation and acts as the puppet to battle with the challenging combat masters. Gulping down a mouthful of saliva, Division Head Liao continued. I only heard of this matter from him once though, so I took it as a joke. But, could it be true? A division head pretending to be a puppet in a trial was not a particularly shocking incident. Naturally, Division Head Feng would not tell such a secret to just anyone, so there were not many in the Combat Master Hall who knew of the matter. Or perhaps, Division Head Liao might even have been the only one aware of the issue. For Division Head Feng to suddenly disappear despite there being no traces that he had left the Combat Master Hall, could he really be acting as a puppet in the trial of martial arts at that very moment? Hall Master Xing was stunned for a moment before asking anxiously, what battle technique did Sun Shi choose? Considering how dedicated Division Head Feng was toward the pursuit of battle techniques, there was no knowing if he would get serious with Sun Shi. It would not be too much of a problem if Division Head Feng injured any of the combat masters, they would at least still be able to resolve it internally, but Sun Shi was their esteemed guest. He chose the Grand Constellation Finger, Division Head Wei replied. That is indeed a powerful battle technique, but it's incredibly difficult to master as well. Sun Shi actually managed to master such a powerful technique despite his age. Hall Master Xing was stunned. He didn't know any of the battle techniques, so Jiao Ten offered him the manual of the Grand Constellation Finger, and he learned it on the spot. Division Head Wei spoke hesitantly, unsure of how he should explain the matter to the others. Before he could finish his words, Division Head Liao had already interjected in a panic. He is going against Old Feng despite only learning the technique moments ago. You should have stopped him. Old Feng is a lunatic, you know. If he learns that Sun Shi is challenging the trial of martial arts after just learning the fundamentals of the technique, he will think that the other party is disrespecting the solemnity of the trial and fly into a rage. You also know how seriously Old Feng takes the cultivation of battle techniques. This is really bad. Old Feng won't show any mercy once he is blinded by wrath. We have to rush in to stop him. At this point, Division Head Liao's eyes were widened in horror, and goosebumps rose all over his arms. Division Head Feng, just like his surname Wan, was a true lunatic. He took everything relating to battle technique seriously, and he would never allow anyone to sully it in the least. Given that Sun Shi had just learned the Grand Constellation Finger moments ago, his lack of mastery would surely show through in the trial in an instant. Once Division Head Feng realized the matter, he would spare no punches in teaching Sun Shi a lesson. And against a raging primordial spirit realm expert, no matter how powerful Sun Shi was, there was no way he could last too long against him. Jia. Panicking, Division Head Liao and the others quickly rushed toward the door of the trial of martial arts to save Sun Shi, but at that moment, the door suddenly creaked open. A young man calmly walked out from the door. As he walked, he leisurely adjusted his robe to tidy himself up. Hall Master Xing and the others ran up to the young man, but upon seeing that the latter was completely unharmed, they couldn't help but ask in intrigue, Sun Shi, are you fine? I'm fine, Zhang Xian replied with a smile. Have you cleared the trial? Division Head Wei asked. It wasn't too difficult. However, I am really impressed by how exquisitely the puppet is crafted. To fully emulate the situation in a true fight, it is even able to spurt blood. If I hadn't known in advance, I might have just thought that it's a real human. Spurt blood? Upon hearing those words, the lips of the crowd began twitching wildly. I was also as surprised as you are back when I saw it. However, as exquisite as it is, there are still some glitches in it that requires fixing. After I defeated it in a direct clash at the same cultivation realm using the same battle technique, I asked it if I have cleared the trial yet or not, but it did not reply to me. So, I could only continue the fight with it. As if that wasn't bad enough, its cultivation even started rising halfway through. I was afraid that I might be no match for it at that rate, so I made a preemptive strike and knocked it out. That should still be considered as a pass, right? Zhang Xian asked slightly worriedly. You knocked it out. Its cultivation started rising halfway through. If they were still uncertain whether or not Division Head Feng was acting as the puppet before, Zhang Xian's words had fully confirmed their doubts. The puppet had to be Division Head Feng. The puppet in the trial of martial arts was not weak, but its strength was fixed. There was no way its cultivation would suddenly rise in the midst of a battle. The only plausible explanation was that it was Division Head Feng in disguise. Let's go in to take a look. Hall Master Xing and the others quickly bypassed Zhang Xian and rushed into the trial, and with just a glance at the situation inside, their faces began twitching uncontrollably. A bloody division head Feng was smashed into the wall, and his clothes had been torn to shreds by some kind of devastating might. His current situation was as unkempt as one could imagine. It's indeed old Feng. Division head Liao quickly rushed forward and placed his fingers on the other party's pulse, confirming that the figure before him was indeed a living human. He flicked his wrist and swiftly popped a recovery pill into Division head Feng's mouth. At the same time, he drove his Jinqi into the latter's body to help the latter assimilate the energy within the pill. Not too long later, the unconscious Division head Feng finally came to. "What are all of you doing here?" Division head Feng asked with a confused look. "Were you assessing a young man earlier before being knocked out?" Hall Master Xing asked hesitantly. "Yes, that does seem to be the case. The young man who came in to challenge the trial earlier has a profound comprehension of the grand constellation finger. Given the same cultivation realm and battle technique, I was no match for him at all. Intrigued, I discreetly raised my cultivation to see how far I could push him, but who would have thought that the fellow would suddenly rush over at that instant and knock me out with a flick of his finger? Then, I can't recall anything anymore." Division head Feng's face reddened. It was not easy for him to meet someone who had achieved such incredible mastery in the grand constellation finger. As a martial arts fanatic, it was inevitable that he would be fascinated by the matter. Wanting to witness the might of the grand constellation finger in its full glory, he had attempted to push the other party a little further. But who could have expected that he would be knocked out before he achieved anything at all? How embarrassing. "You are really..." Hearing those words, Hall Master Xing could not help but sigh in vexation. For an esteemed division head of the Combat Master Hall to be pummeled into such a tragic state by a mere Saint One Dan fellow. Hall Master Xing really had no idea what to make of the matter. However, recalling how he and another two division heads had been completely subdued by Sun Shi back in the Heart Division at all, he realized that he was not really in a position to admonish the division head Feng either. "Right, how did you know that I was in here? Also, who is that young man?" Division head Feng asked curiously. "I don't think I have seen him around in the Combat Master Hall before." While he did not know all of the combat masters in the Combat Master Hall, he could still recognize most of their faces. The face of the young man looked extremely foreign to him, so there was a good chance that he was not from their Combat Master Hall. "He's a spirit awakener whom Hall Master Xing invited over to help enchant his primordial spirit," Division head Liao explained. "He's a spirit awakener?" Division head Feng was stunned. "But he was able to overpower me easily even when the both of us were at the same cultivation realm. You are telling me that a spirit awakener has managed to attain such a deep comprehension of the profound grand constellation finger? One must know that he was the head of the martial arts division. With his deep comprehension of battle techniques, he wielded fighting prowess far surpassing his peers. With such strength, it was nigh impossible for any cultivator of a lower cultivation realm to match him even when he had suppressed his cultivation to the other party's level. Yet, a spirit awakener had not only managed to subdue him but even easily knocked him out when he attempted to raise his cultivation. It's the truth. Sun Shi isn't just a spirit awakener but a master teacher as well. It's like this." Seeing the look of disbelief on Division head Feng's face, Hall Master Xing could only explain the various happenings earlier. "This..." Division head Feng's body stiffened in shock, not daring to believe what he had just heard. Just 11 breaths after he looked through the manual of the Grand Constellation Finger, he has already attained a mastery in the technique that far surpasses what I have achieved in the past several hundred years. Seeing that Division head Feng had his confidence utterly shattered, Hall Master Xing quickly stepped in to change the topic. "It's meaningless to judge true geniuses by our common sense. Come, I'll introduce Sun Shi to you." Division head Feng sighed deeply before nodding. The very moment that the group stepped out of the trial room together, they saw innumerable combat masters kneeling and kowtowing on the ground. Their excited and admiration-filled gazes were directed toward a young man not too far away. Teacher, thank you for opening our eyes. Chapter 1129, St. Tu Dan Heaven's Path Divine Art. This. Seeing even the most talented genius of his martial arts division bowing to the young man, division head Feng was completely bewildered. What in the world happened? Aren't the combat masters of our combat master hall supposed to be prideful individuals who never bow to anyone? The young man left the trial just moments earlier, and all of them had already acknowledged him as their teacher. Unable to stand it any longer, Hall Master Xing walked up to Elder Qi and asked, Elder Qi, what is going on? Sun Shi imparted some pointers on how one could more effectively utilize battle techniques, and it was deeply enlightening. Elder Qi replied with a face flushed crimson from agitation, and his fingers were trembling non-stop. It was as if even he was tempted to acknowledge Sun Shi as his teacher as well. Just some pointers on effectively utilizing battle techniques have left them in such a state. Division head Feng could hardly believe what he was hearing. Their martial arts division had a huge collection of insights from preceding combat masters on how one could maximize the effectiveness of their battle techniques in battle, but most of them were conflicting with one another. Each of them made sense in their own ways, thus making it impossible to tell the correct insights from the incorrect. For Sun Shi to win the reverence of everyone here just by lecturing a bit on the subject. Wasn't that a little too exaggerated? You are only saying that because you didn't hear the content of his lecture. Forget it, it'll be difficult to explain it to you at the moment. Just grab a combat master and ask him about the matter later on. Those who had not listened to the lecture would never comprehend how profound and novel that young man's interpretation of the subject was. Ignoring the confused division head Feng, Elder Qi rushed up to Zhang Xian and clasped his fist respectfully. Sun Shi, we meet again. Thank you for saving my life back in the Jinyuan city. Even though Sun Shi had altered his appearance, there was not much change to his voice. Just by hearing him speak, Elder Qi was certain that the young man before him was the middle-aged man who had saved him back then. It's you. What are you doing here? Zhang Xian was surprised. To his astonishment, the elder before him was the eccentric old man whom he had met in Jinyuan city. Back then, the eccentric old man had been plagued by a lethal poison, resulting in a languishing aura around him. However, in this moment, his face had a healthy red glow to it, and his aura felt more vigorous and livelier than ever. Had the other party not addressed him directly, he would not have believed that the person standing before him was actually the same old man he had met back then. It's all thanks to Sun Shi's help. I was able to successfully make a full recovery after you cured my poison. Just a while ago, I successfully made a breakthrough, so I decided to return here to exact my vengeance. Elder Qi replied. Zhang Xian nodded in realization. Without a doubt, Elder Qi's poison was the result of someone's malicious deeds. Considering how long he had suffered under the torture of the poison, there was no way he would be willing to let the culprit get away scot-free, especially since he had managed to regain his strength. Don't worry about it. I have already received your medicinal herbs as compensation, so we're even now, Zhang Xian replied with a smile. Then, he turned to Division Head Wei and said, I have defeated the puppet earlier, so I should have cleared the trial, right? May I trouble you to lead me to the book collection? Of course. Division Head Wei's lips twitched a little as he swiftly nodded. Those who cleared the trial were able to access Division Head Feng's collection of books. As this was the rule Division Head Feng had set himself, there was no one who would complain about that. There was no need to trouble Division Head Feng over this matter. Besides, if the other combat masters were to learn of this matter, Division Head Feng would probably die of embarrassment. Following behind Division Head Wei, Zhang Xian soon entered a library. On the other hand, upon noting Zhang Xian's departure, Hall Master Xing and the others hurriedly rushed up to Elder Qi and asked, Elder Qi, is he, really the Sun Chang you were talking about? The reason Elder Qi had hurried over so anxiously was to confirm whether the other party was the benefactor who had saved him previously. He's definitely my benefactor. It doesn't seem like he's the Zhang Xian person whom you were talking about. Elder Qi nodded. Given that he was acquainted with Sun Shi back at Jinyuan City, there did not seem to have been any need for the other party to disguise himself as another person back then. Going by this logic, it did not seem likely for the other party to be Principal Zhang. Thank goodness. Hall Master Xing heaved a sigh of relief. Noting the other party's response, Elder Qi asked in bewilderment, "What's wrong? Do you have a conflict with Principal Zhang? He's well respected in the Hongyuan Empire, and there's hardly any discredit to his name. Did he offend the Combat Master Hall in some way?" Zhang Xian's name was resounding in the Hongyuan Empire, to the extent that his reputation surpassed even that of Emperor Yu Shenqing. Countless youths regarded him as their idol. Putting aside the many incredible feats and merits he had accomplished, there was not a shred of dishonor to his name. Given so, it should be safe to assume that he was a person of noble stature. Why would Hall Master Xing fear such a person so? There are no conflicts between us. It's a long story. Hall Master Xing realized that he had acted inappropriately upon hearing Elder Qi's question, so he quickly waved his hand. Division Head Liao sent a telepathic message to Hall Master Xing. "Hall Master Xing, since it's confirmed that Sun Shi isn't Zhang Xian, and considering his incredible talent and outstanding comprehension of battle techniques, if we could have him represent our Combat Master Hall in the exchange with the Xianxian faction." Hearing those words, Hall Master Xing's eyes lit up. Indeed. After witnessing it with his own eyes, even he had no choice but to admit that the Xianxian faction was a formidable foe. He had been confident of victory given that he had achieved a breakthrough and obtained the highest secret art, Vitreous Heart Tempering Sutra, of the Combat Master Hall, but on second thought, there was still a huge gap between their combat skills. If the Combat Master Hall were to win by sheer strength and not skill, it would not reflect too well on them either. However, Sun Shi was different. In terms of combat skills, he could use a battle technique that he had learned moments ago to overwhelm Division Head Feng. In terms of state of mind, even the founder of the Heart Division had approved of him and willingly given him the highest control over the Heart Division's formations. In terms of Jinqi, he could shatter 10 stone walls in the trial of inner breath simultaneously. In terms of real fighting prowess, he could escape from a collaborative offense from the three of them. No matter how one looked at it, Sun Shi was an expert among experts. There were none who could rival him in the same level. If they could have him represent the Combat Master Hall in the exchange against the Xianxian faction, the reputation of the Combat Master Hall would surely be boosted significantly. At the same time, it would also immensely increase their chances in bringing the Xianxian faction under them. That's a good idea. After another moment of deep contemplation, Hall Master Xing continued. However, he's ultimately not from our Combat Master Hall. If we have him fight on our behalf and others learn of it, will the reputation of our Combat Master Hall be sullied? That won't be a problem. We could have him represent our Combat Master Hall in the fight against Principal Zhang. If he wins, the Xianxian faction will come under our Qingyuan Empire Combat Master Hall. Once that happens, not only will our reputation not take a dip, it will even soar to unprecedented heights, Division Head Liao said. You're right. Hall Master Xing nodded. That was indeed the case. If they could have the bunch from the Xianxian faction join the Combat Master Hall, their Qingyuan Empire's branch would surely grow stronger and stronger. With time, they might even become a powerhouse within the alliance. Even if the Xianxian faction had complaints then, they could deal with it internally. It would not affect their overall situation. But, what if he loses? Hall Master Xing was still a little worried. Sun Shi was indeed a formidable opponent, but Principal Zhang was not a pushover either. No matter what, he was the man who single-handedly groomed their potential progeny of combat, Zheng Yang, and he was also the man behind the overwhelming strength of the Xianxian faction. There was no way such a person like that could possibly be weak. If we lose, there will be no way around it. At the very most, our entire Combat Master Hall will join the Xianxian faction. Division Head Liao said grimly. This Hall Master Xing fell silent upon hearing those words. We have no other option at this point. Once it becomes known that Division Head Zhou, Division Head Lu, and the others have already defected to the Xianxian faction, it will surely cause a huge uproar. With time, more and more combat masters will turn to the Xianxian faction. Division Head Liao said bitterly. It was not that he wanted to do this, but they were truly cornered at this point. In terms of overall prowess, the Xianxian faction was definitely no match for the Combat Master Hall. However, their comprehension of combat had reached an unfathomable level. It was inevitable that the strength-seeking combat masters would be drawn to them. Of course, this was not necessarily a bad thing. If the combat masters could learn from the Xianxian faction, their fighting prowess would be brought up to a whole new level. The only issue at the moment was who wielded the dominant position. If the Combat Master Hall was forced to be subservient to a lesser organization, they would become a laughingstock. Given that this matter concerned the future of the Combat Master Hall, Hall Master Xing had to tread carefully regarding this matter. He thought deeply for a moment before eventually sighing in resignation. You're right, we can only do it this way now. I'll talk to Sunshur about the matter later when he's done browsing through the books. For the Combat Master Hall to be cornered by a lesser organization from a Tier 1 empire, what a farcical situation they had found themselves in. But that was indeed what was happening, so he had no choice but to face it. It might seem absurd, but the Xianxian faction could very well be the greatest crisis they had ever faced. The Xianxian faction's superior combat skills and philosophy of impartation without discrimination were a bad match for the Combat Master Hall. Putting aside the division heads, if not for the fact that the pride and honor of the Combat Master Hall lay on his shoulders, Hall Master Xing would have rushed over to learn from them as well. At this point, he could only wish for the best. This is the library of the Martial Arts Division. What an incredible collection of books. Unaware of the thoughts of Hall Master Xing and the others, Zhang Xian's excited gaze was currently fixated on the innumerable shelves of books before him. As expected of the Martial Arts Division, their collection was nothing short of impressive. On top of the 200 Saint-tier battle techniques listed for the trial of martial arts, there were also tens of thousands of Spirit-tier battle techniques as well. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up in excitement. With these battle techniques, I might just be able to perfect the Heavenly Demon Great Sorrow Palm into a Heaven's Path battle technique. What he was lacking the most at the moment was high-tier battle technique manuals. With so many of them, he would be able to raise his comprehension of battle techniques up a notch, thus bringing his fighting prowess to another level. Flaws. Zhang Xian swiftly laid his eyes on the first shelf and began collecting the books into his library of Heaven's Path. Walala! Books were appearing in the library of Heaven's Path at an incredible speed. 10 minutes later, Zhang Xian had finally finished taking in all of the battle technique manuals. There really is a substantial collection of Saint Tu Dan cultivation techniques here. After browsing through the battle techniques, Zhang Xian turned his sight to the last few shelves and saw all kinds of Jinqi cultivation techniques. All in all, there were roughly several hundred of them. There were also a couple of Saint 3 Dan and Saint 4 Dan cultivation technique manuals, but there were not too many of them, numbering only around 4 to 5 each. Zhang Xian swiftly glanced over them and collected them into the library of Heaven's Path as well. Compile. In the blink of an eye, 3 books appeared before Zhang Xian's eyes, Saint 2 Dan, Saint 3 Dan, and Saint 4 Dan. He swiftly flipped through them. I have finally managed to form the Saint 2 Dan Heaven's Path Divine Art. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up in excitement as he heaved a sigh of relief. Those hundreds of books had allowed him to perfect the Saint 2 Dan cultivation technique. Unfortunately, there were still many flaws with the Saint 3 Dan and Saint 4 Dan cultivation techniques, so he could not cultivate them at the moment. Nevertheless, he was satisfied. I should just push for a breakthrough here, Zhang Xian thought. There was no one in the library, and it was extremely quiet. At the same time, he could not be bothered to find another place outside, so he headed to a corner and entered the myriad anthive nest. Considering his cultivation's strong foundation, his breakthrough would surely cause a commotion. How embarrassing it would be if he were to accidentally destroy the other party's library in the midst of doing so. It would be safer for him to do it in the myriad anthive nest. In the myriad anthive nest, he quickly found himself a quiet place before setting up a grade 7 spirit gathering formation. Following which, he threw several thousand high-tier spirit stones in before sitting in the middle of it. High-tier spirit stones were starting to become ineffective in his cultivation, so he needed a spirit gathering formation to maximize their effects. Otherwise, if he were to just absorb them normally, it would be difficult for him to build up the momentum required for a breakthrough. Once all preparations were ready, Zhang Xian went through the Saint Tu Dan Heaven's Path divine art in his mind once more before devouring the surrounding spiritual energy greedily and swiftly converting them into Jinqi. Saint Tu Dan's spiritual perception realm. At this level, cultivators would open their incipient eye, allowing them to perceive their surroundings more vividly than any of their other senses through their spiritual perception. While a breakthrough to this realm would not raise a cultivator's basic strength by too much, the enhanced perception of one's surroundings would allow one to make more precise movements in battle, and often, that could be the difference between victory and defeat. This should be enough. Time to open my incipient eye. With his eyes closed, Zhang Xian's consciousness slowly crept into his dantian before eventually stopping before his golden origin core, which sat at the center of his dantian. Chapter 1130, Knock His Teeth Out. With a tense look, Zhang Xian began to drive his Jinqi according to the Saint Tu Dan Heaven's Path divine art. A brilliant glow burst from his origin core, and it slowly began to revolve with increasing speed. An immense wave of spiritual energy gushed in from the surrounding formation, nourishing his origin core. In the blink of an eye, a vortex of spiritual energy reminiscent of a tornado had already formed above Zhang Xian, producing a deafening whirring sound. The process to opening one's incipient eye was extremely complicated, so Zhang Xian dared not let his guard down. He controlled the immense amount of Jinqi flowing through his body with incredible precision, not leaving the slightest gap for error. Hung long long. As spiritual energy was gathering at a rate too fast, the myriad anthive nest began to shake violently. The 10 kings of the cloud mist ridge looked over with astonished looks, unable to believe what they were seeing. They had reached spiritual perception realm not too long ago, and from their experience, opening the incipient eye should not have caused such a huge ruckus. But why was it that such conventions did not apply to their master? Not only so, they even felt a powerful pressure weighing down on them. Being driven by the Heaven's Path divine art, the devoured spiritual energy was swiftly converted into the incomparably pure Heaven's Path Jinqi before being channeled toward the origin core. Tzzzzzzzzzzzz. Under the massive influx of Jinqi, the massive origin core slowly opened up, similar to a blossoming flower. A being reminiscent of an eyeball slowly emerged from within, and it looked as if it would open its eyes at any moment. This was the crucial period, and Zhang Xian knew it as well. Widening his pores as large as he could, he swiftly consumed all of the spiritual energy around him and gathered it all together, forming an incredible deluge similar to a rapid river. Open! Zhang Xian roared as a torrent of Jinqi surged toward his origin core. In the breakthrough to Saint Tu Dan, a cultivator had to channel his Jinqi toward his origin core to tear open the incipient eye. As long as the point that the Jinqi was channeled toward was correct, the incipient eye should open easily, thus unlocking the cultivator's spiritual perception. Voila! The torrent forcefully struck against Zhang Xian's origin core, causing a brilliant light to burst from the latter as it revolved on the spot from the impact. However, it slowly came to a halt, and the seemingly opening incipient eye reverted back to its original shape, as if nothing had happened at all. Why isn't it working? Zhang Xian frowned. He had strictly followed the Saint Tu Dan Heaven's Path divine art for his breakthrough, and under normal circumstances, he should have opened his incipient eye easily. Yet, why was nothing happening at all? Could there be a problem with his Heaven's Path divine art? That was impossible. Zhang Xian took another look at his cultivation technique and confirmed that there were no flaws in it. Just to double-check, he examined every single sentence carefully, and there was not a single mistake in any one of them. Frowning, he thought, I should give it another try. Hung Long. Spiritual energy gushed into Zhang Xian's body once more, and after it was successfully converted into Heaven's Path Shinqi, it was channeled toward his origin core. Bam! After the powerful collision of the Shinqi, Zhang Xian's origin core began spinning once more. However, just like before, it stopped not too long after and fell silent. Zhang Xian was bewildered. His cultivation had always progressed smoothly all along, and not once had he failed in pushing for a breakthrough before. But this. He had already attempted it twice, but it still was not working. That could not be right. There was no flaw in his cultivation technique, and the amount of Jinqi that he had was sufficient as well. Let me give it another try. Frowning, Zhang Xian attempted to push for another breakthrough. Some time later, Zhang Xian finally came to a halt. He was panting heavily at the moment, and there was a bitter smile on his face. I finally get it. There's no mistake the cultivation technique, and I didn't comprehend it incorrectly either. It's that my origin core is too powerful, and the spiritual energy within high-tier spirit stones isn't pure enough to stimulate it. That's why I wasn't able to open my incipient eye. After multiple tries, Zhang Xian had finally managed to make sense of the situation. It was not that there was a problem in his cultivation, his origin core was simply too powerful. The origin core formed from the Saint Ascension decipher was too stable, and it had been further refined in the Saint Ascension ordeal, which created a layer of sacred energy around it. To make a comparison, the sturdiness of his origin core was roughly at the level of a Saint Intermediate tier artifact. The purity of the spiritual energy within high-tier spirit stones was insufficient to break it open. Zhang Xian rubbed his glabella in distress as he halted the formation and stood up once more. I must find an even purer source of spiritual energy. He had encountered such a problem before. As his cultivation rose, his requirement for spiritual energy steadily increased as well. There was a time when his cultivation could be advanced greatly with just low-tier spirit stones, but before long, he had found himself needing middle-tier spirit stones, then high-tier spirit stones, and now, even high-tier spirit stones were not sufficient. This was not a problem of quantity but quality. If the quality did not meet the minimum requirement, no amount of quantity could make up for it. Previously, he had already felt high-tier spirit stones becoming less and less effective on his cultivation, and the quantity he needed for each breakthrough was increasing exponentially. Nevertheless, he had thought that it should still suffice for a few more realms, but it seemed like he had been too optimistic. The Combat Master Hall must have purer spirit stones. Let me see if I can purchase some from them. While Zhang Xian was helpless before this matter, the Combat Master Hall might just be able to resolve the issue. After all, the Combat Master Hall was an organization that the Master Teacher Pavilion heavily invested in so as to create powerful experts to protect mankind. As such, they never lacked resources. This was also why he had sent Zheng Yang to the Combat Master Hall headquarters to vie for the position of the progeny of combat. If Zheng Yang successfully cleared the trial, through tapping into the vast resources and complete heritage of the Combat Master Hall, he would likely be able to advance his cultivation at an astounding speed. And more importantly, this was a good opportunity to temper his state of mind too. Let me ask Hall Master Xing about the matter then, Zhang Xian thought. As long as he could obtain even purer spirit stones, he would be able to make a breakthrough to spiritual perception realm easily. However, such spirit stones were bound to be extremely valuable and rare. Nevertheless, he had no intention of taking them for free. As long as the Combat Master Hall was willing to sell them to him, he would surely pay a price that could satisfy them. After leaving the myriad anthive nest, Zhang Xian swiftly left the library and entered the main hall of the Martial Arts Division, where Hall Master Xing happened to be waiting. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up, and he quickly walked up to him. Hall Master Xing, it's great that you are here. I happen to have a matter that I need to trouble you on. Sun Shi, feel free to state your request. There's no need to stand on ceremony with me. As long as it's something within my means, consider it done. Hall Master Xing swiftly responded in delight. He had just been wondering how he could convince Sun Shi to help him with the matter of the Xianxian faction when the latter suddenly said that he had a request. After everything that Sun Shi had done for their combat master Hall, mending his primordial spirit and gifting the altered vitreous heart tempering sutra back to them, he wasn't in a good position to ask the latter for another favor. However, if Sun Shi had a request to ask of them, that would make things easier for him. It's actually like this. I need a spirit stone that is even purer than a high-tier spirit stone for my cultivation, and I would like to inquire if your combat master Hall has any. If so, I am willing to pay any price to purchase it. Without beating around the bush, Zhang Xian dived straight to the main point. This. Hall Master Xing was slightly taken aback. If you are seeking pinnacle spirit stones, that is a commodity that only those of Saint Six Dan and above are qualified to use, so I'm afraid that it will be nigh impossible to find even one of those in the Qingyuan Empire. You will have to head to a higher tier empire than that. Qingyuan Empire Combat Master Hall doesn't have any pinnacle spirit stones. Zhang Xian frowned. Regretfully, that's the case. Hall Master Xing shook his head. At this moment, he suddenly recalled something and said, actually, if you don't mind, we do have some concentrated high-tier spirit stones. The spiritual energy contained within them is indeed significantly purer than ordinary high-tier spirit stones, so perhaps they might just work for you? Concentrated high-tier spirit stones? Zhang Xian was bewildered. He had never heard of such a thing before. High-tier spirit stones can be mined from ordinary spirit veins, but concentrated high-tier spirit stones are only found in the more potent spirit veins that produces pinnacle spirit stones. In terms of purity, they are nowhere near pinnacle spirit stones, but there is no doubt that they are still much purer than high-tier spirit stones. It's for that reason that they are known as concentrated high-tier spirit stones, Hall Master Xing explained. Zhang Xian nodded in realization. Spirit veins could be divided into several levels, too. Some of the weaker spirit veins could only produce the inexpensive low-tier spirit stones, whereas those truly formidable ones could produce pinnacle spirit stones at their very core. In those spirit veins that could produce pinnacle spirit stones, due to the incredible concentration of spiritual energy, even the outskirts of the spirit vein would produce spirit stones, and their quality far exceeded that of ordinary high-tier spirit stones. May I know how many concentrated high-tier spirit stones the Combat Master Hall has? If possible, I would like to purchase some, Zhang Xian quickly replied. Since concentrated high-tier spirit stones were purer than ordinary high-tier spirit stones, they just might prove useful in helping him achieve a breakthrough to Saint Tu Dan realm. In truth, even our Combat Master Hall doesn't have too many concentrated high-tier spirit stones. All in all, we only have 10 of them. However, if Sun Shi requires it, we can give 5 of them to you. Hall Master Xing said. That would be imposing too much on you. How much do they cost? I'll just buy them from you, Zhang Xian replied. If he were to accept a favor from the other party, he would probably have to pay it back somehow in the future. Since he was not in any lack of money, there was no need for him to owe such a debt to others for the sake of saving money. Hall Master Xing hesitated for a moment before speaking. To be honest with you, there's something that we need Sun Shi's help on. If you can help us with this matter, we will be more than glad to give the 5 concentrated high-tier spirit stones to you. May I inquire what it is? Zhang Xian was bewildered. The Combat Master Hall was one of the strongest organizations in Qingyuan Empire, and Hall Master Xing had even recently made a breakthrough to the Leaving Aperture realm. It was really a little unexpected to hear that they would require his help. It's regarding the trouble that I mentioned to you not too long ago, Hall Master Xing said with an unsettled look. Oh. Zhang Xian's interest was piqued. It's a little embarrassing, but that trouble is caused by a single cultivator. That cultivator's cultivation isn't too high, but he wields incredible fighting prowess. I fear that given the same cultivation realm, there are none in our combat master hall who are a match for him. Hall Master Xing sighed deeply as he spoke with a vexed tone. He had done a rough gauge, and even he would struggle to face Principal Zhang's direct disciples given the same cultivation realm. It was likely that the teacher would be even stronger than that. If the cultivation of that cultivator who is causing you trouble is not too high, why don't you just find someone to pummel him secretly? Surely it should suffice for you to scare him off. The Combat Master Hall isn't as rule-bound as the Master Teacher Pavilion, so such should be fine, right? Zhang Xian asked. The Combat Master Hall served a differing function as the Master Teacher Pavilion. The Master Teacher Pavilion served as the teachers of humanity, so naturally, they had to be role models for others, so it was inevitable that there would be many rules surrounding it. On the other hand, the Combat Master Hall served as the military of humanity, so it was not necessary for them to be as rule-bound as the Master Teacher Pavilion. Besides, since the other party dared cause trouble despite his lack of strength, it should be well within the rights of the Combat Master Hall to retaliate. If he was the Hall Master, he would have had that cultivator pummeled into the ground first before talking the matter out. Was there a need for them to be so vexed over the matter? Cough cough. Hall Master Xing choked on his saliva. That cultivator happens to be a master teacher. He's a master teacher. Zhang Xian stroked his lower jaw and frowned. There could be troublesome repercussions if such forceful methods were to be used against a master teacher. However, that should not be a problem either. Master teachers are bound by many rules, so you can use that against him. For one, you could challenge him on something that he is not proficient in and force him to back down. Alternatively, you could bring in the Master Teacher Pavilion to mediate in the matter. If he still refuses to budge, then, you could just capture him and have him sent to the subterranean gallery. Master teachers were protected by the Master Teacher Pavilion, so it would be difficult to deal with him directly. Nevertheless, given the considerably close ties between the Combat Master Hall and the Master Teacher Pavilion, it should be possible to deal with the other party through bureaucracy. Since the other party was not too strong, he was likely just a 6-star master teacher. Even if he had powerful fighting prowess, his standing in the Master Teacher Pavilion was unlikely to be very high. Any higher-ranked master teacher would be able to subdue him easily. Zhang Xian had been placed in such a situation several times himself, so he was rather familiar with it. Surely, there was no need for Hall Master Xing to worry so much about this matter. If only it were that simple. Hall Master Xing shook his head and sighed. The other party is an upstanding and reputable master teacher, so we dare not go too far with him. That's why we wish to invite Sun Shi to fight in our stead. His cultivation realm is at the same level as yours, and with your means, we believe that you should be able to defeat him with ease. You want me to fight him in your stead? Zhang Xian smiled confidently. That isn't a problem at all. I have never lost in a fight against a peer before. Don't worry, I'll help you knock all of his teeth out. He'll regret having messed with the Combat Master Hall. Chapter 1131, Spiritual Perception Realm. His current strength was nothing in Qingyuan Empire, but in terms of matching his peers, he had absolute confidence at victory. Regardless of who it was, well, perhaps excluding that monster of a clone he had, as long as the other party was of the same cultivation realm as him, he was confident that he could have the other party crying for their daddies and mummies at the end of the duel. To dare to cause trouble in the Combat Master Hall, he sure was brazen. As long as I, Zhang Xian, am around, regardless of which hole you have crawled out from or how formidable you might be, there won't be a shred of arrogance left once I am done with you. With Sun Shi's promise, I am reassured. Hearing those words, Hall Master Xing heaved a sigh of relief as a smile appeared on his lips. Despite possessing only a cultivation of Saint One Dan Pinnacle, Sun Shi was able to dodge the simultaneous attack from 3 of them. The great strength he possessed was undeniable. No matter how powerful Principal Zhang may be, he definitely wouldn't be walking out of a duel with him unscathed. However, Sun Shi, you still have to be careful. That trouble I told you is said to be an invincible existence in his cultivation realm. Even though I haven't really witnessed his strength in person or not, the many rumors that surround him suggest that he isn't any weaker than you. Hall Master Xing hesitated for a moment before saying. He was deeply confident in Sun Shi's strength, but the opponent wasn't easy either. It was best to proceed carefully. He isn't any weaker than me. Zhang Xian was slightly taken aback for a moment before nodding. It was surprising to hear that there was someone who was able to match him in the same cultivation realm, especially since he cultivated the Saint Ascension Decipher and successfully ascended to become a celestial saint. However, considering the immense size of the master-teacher continent, there might just be true geniuses who could match him. His clone was one such example. Despite being of the same cultivation realm, he didn't recall a single occasion where he could defeat his clone in battle. It was truly frustrating. Considering how wary Hall Master Xing was regarding the matter, the other party's strength was likely to be truly frightening. It seemed like he had met his match this time around. Indeed. I have never met the other party in person, but just the fighting prowess of his students is already plenty frightening. At the same cultivation realm, even I would struggle to match them. Thus, Sun Shi, you mustn't underestimate your opponent. Even you would struggle to match the other party's students? Zhang Xian was astonished. It was already incredible for the other party to be powerful, but who could have thought that the other party's students would be so formidable as well? At this point, Zhang Xian couldn't help but feel intrigued by the other party. Interesting. I'll be looking forward to meeting him then. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. If he could fight against such a talented master teacher, it might give him some inspiration as to how he could further his fighting prowess. Sun Shi, we have appointed a duel with the other party earlier, and it would be held a few days from while. Meanwhile, why don't you cultivate in our combat master hall and further your fighting prowess? Each of our 10 divisions has complete heritages, and they might prove to be of some use to you in further developing your strength. Hall Master Xing said. Given how quickly the other party had managed to cultivate the grand constellation finger, he should be able to master the other expertise of their combat master hall swiftly too. With the future of the combat master hall at stake, they couldn't afford to take any risk. As long as it was something that could boost their chances at victory, they would have to grasp tightly onto it. It would be a pleasure. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. He happened to be looking towards furthering his Heaven's Path fist art, Heaven's Path palm art, Heaven's Path movement art, and the such at the moment, and the high-tier battle techniques of the Combat Master Hall was indubitably an invaluable asset for that. This was a precious opportunity to learn, so naturally, he wouldn't turn it down. Here is a token which represents my authority. With this in hand, you will be able to challenge any trial and enter any library in the Combat Master Hall freely. Seeing how the other party was still able to remain humble despite his astounding strength, Hall Master Xing nodded in approval. After which, he flicked his wrist and tossed a token over. Zhang Xian casually caught it. After which, Hall Master Xing flicked his wrist once more and took out a slender but long jade container before explaining, here are the 5 concentrated high-tier spirit stones, I'll pass them to Sun Shi first as well. This battle is truly important to our Combat Master Hall, so I wish you luck in furthering your strength. Thank you. Not expecting to receive the spirit stones ahead of the battle, Zhang Xian felt deeply grateful. Since the other party trusted him so much, he had to return the favor and help the other party resolve their problem at its root. At the very least, he would pummel that troublemaker to the point where he would be unable to even manage his day-to-day functions. The Combat Master Hall wasn't an organization that likes of his could trifle with. Sitting quietly in an isolated chamber, Zhang Xian quickly conditioned his current state to the peak before taking out the long jade container. Right after giving Hall Master Xing his word, he quickly entered an isolated chamber to cultivate. With the concentrated high-tier spirit stones in hand, it was about time for him to push for a breakthrough. With a swift flick of his finger, the seal on the jade container vanished, and incredibly pure spiritual energy immediately began wafting from the container. Placed within the container were 5 crystalline spirit stones. Transparent, Zhang Xian could see the many streaks of pure spiritual energy flowing to and fro within it like little dragons. It felt as if they would burst out from the spirit stones at any moment and soar into the sky. The spiritual energy within is indeed much purer than high-tier spirit stones. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. Through his observation, he could tell that the purity of the concentrated high-tier spirit stone was at least twice the level of ordinary high-tier spirit stones. With it, he would definitely be able to overcome the Saint One Dan bottleneck with ease. Alright, time to begin. Whipping out a spirit stone and grasping in his hand, Zhang Xian closed his eyes. Boom! Pure spiritual energy immediately began surging into his body, and they were swiftly converted into Heaven's Path Jinqi. As ordinary high-tier spirit stones were simply not pure enough for the current him, he was only able to absorb an average of 10% of the spiritual energy within. On the other hand, using the concentrated high-tier spirit stones, he found that he could absorb nearly 100% of the spiritual energy within. The conversion efficiency was truly at a wholly different level. To put it in other words, the effects of a single concentrated high-tier spirit stone was far greater than even several thousands of high-tier spirit stones combined. Hula! In the blink of an eye, the newly converted Jinqi finally arrived before Zhang Xian's origin core. With his previous experiences in attempting for a breakthrough, his movements were extremely smooth. With a thought, he had all of his Jinqi gushing towards his origin core like a furious torrent. Jai. Under the relentless striking of the torrent, the incredibly sturdy origin core finally began to open. However, barely after opening a slit, Zhang Xian already felt that his Jinqi was running dry. If he were to stop at this juncture, it would render his previous efforts futile. Continue. At this crucial period, Zhang Xian couldn't afford to stop. Without any hesitation, he picked up another concentrated high-tier spirit stone and began absorbing the energy within. Hong Long. A long time later, the sturdy origin core finally broke open. An object reminiscent of an eye sat in its place, illuminating the surroundings. Along with the opening of the incipient eye, Zhang Xian felt his consciousness suddenly extending beyond himself, into the surroundings. In the blink of an eye, every nook and cranny within the chamber lay bare before his consciousness. Minor details which he would only notice with just his eye of insight previously, they could all be vividly felt by him at this very moment. Those books in the distance, even if he didn't open them, he could still see the content within each and every page. This is spiritual perception. It is truly a powerful ability. Zhang Xian's face flushed in agitation. Through the means of the soul oracle, he was also capable of scanning his surroundings with his soul energy. What was different about it and the spiritual perception was that the spiritual perception amplified what he could see by manyfold, as if someone had fitted a magnifier before his senses. Even the most minor of details could be perceived by him with astounding clarity. It was no wonder why a breakthrough to spiritual perception realm would result in a huge leap in one's fighting prowess despite the minimal increase in Jinqi and strength. Just by opening one's spiritual perception in battle, a cultivator would be able to perceive every single move made by his opponent, allowing him to easily dodge, retaliate, or even predict the future moves that his opponent would make. If I had the spiritual perception previously, I would have been able to flee from Hall Master Xing and the others with greater ease previously. It wouldn't have been such a close shave each time around. Zhang Xian thought as he exhaled a mouthful of turbid gas. While he did manage to successfully flee from the combined assault of Hall Master Xing and the others earlier one, it was by a hair's breadth every single time. This was due to a lack of his grasp over his surroundings. His attention had to be fixed on dealing with the assault he was currently facing, leaving him unable to effectively perceive the movements of the other two to guard against them. This had left him in a truly bad position. With his spiritual perception, if he were to find himself in such a position once more, he would be able to make the better decisions in view of his overall circumstances, and his escape would surely have been far smoother. Continue. The breakthrough alleviated the deep pressure that Zhang Xian was feeling within from his students swiftly closing up to him. Heaving a sigh of relief, he picked up another concentrated high-tier spirit stone and began driving his Jinqi once more. Spiritual Perception Realm Primary Stage. Spiritual Perception Realm Intermediate Stage. Spiritual Perception Realm Advanced Stage. Spiritual Perception Realm Pinnacle. Within an hour, his cultivation had soared to Saint Tu Dan Pinnacle. However, at the same time, the 5 concentrated high-tier spirit stones had been completely depleted as well, reducing to mere white powder. Let me see how far I can extend my spiritual perception for. With such a thought in mind, Zhang Xian began concentrating on expanding his consciousness. According to the records on books, depending on the cultivation technique one cultivated, the area where one's spiritual perception could cover would differ as well. A typical spiritual perception realm pinnacle expert would generally be able to expand his spiritual perception over a radius of 400 meters or so. Those who were stronger could reach 500 to 600 meters, but there was nearly no one who could reach the 1,000 meters mark. Given that he had cultivated the Saint Ascension Decipher and Heaven's Path Divine Art, he was interested to see how he compared to other cultivators. Hula! Extending his spiritual perception outward, it swiftly crept beyond the isolated chamber. 400, 500. Zhang Xian counted mentally. In the blink of an eye, it had already reached the 500 meters mark. 1,000, 2,000. Zhang Xian thought that 1,000 meters should be where his limit lay, but he found that he could continue to push it forward with relative ease. Eventually, it was only at the 2,500 meters mark where he found that he had reached his limit. 2,500 meters, that's roughly 6 times more than that of ordinary cultivators. Zhang Xian thought excitedly as he retracted his spiritual perception. He knew that his spiritual perception was bound to be powerful due to the strength of his Heaven's Path Divine Art, but he hadn't expected that it would be such an extent. One must know that the space that one's spiritual perception covered increased exponentially along with the increase in radius, so expanding one's spiritual perception was an increasingly difficult task. In terms of the space covered, Zhang Xian was more than 200 times more than an ordinary cultivator. With such a wide spiritual perception, he could easily notice the movement of anyone in the vicinity, making it difficult for anyone to spring an assault on him in battle. On top of that, it seems like the keenness at which I can perceive my surroundings is far above that of other cultivators too. Zhang Xian noted as he exhaled deeply. This matter was truly too astonishing. If he were to speak of it, who knew how many cultivators would be scared to death? As per his usual practice, it would be best for him to maintain a low profile. The Combat Master Hall is indeed worthy of its title as one of the strongest organizations in Qingyuan City. With even just a swift scan, Zhang Xian found that the Combat Master Hall was filled with innumerable powerful formations which could easily kill even primordial spirit realm experts upon contact. It was fortunate that he had strictly instructed Ruohuan Gongzi and the others to keep those of the Xianxian faction in check. Otherwise, if they were to cause trouble here, the consequences could be dire. With my breakthrough to spiritual perception realm, I should be able to match primordial spirit realm experts now. While Zhang Xian's strength hadn't risen with his breakthrough to spiritual perception realm, his fighting prowess did increase significantly. In the past, he could only subdue primordial spirit realm cultivators through springing sudden assaults, but with his newfound strength, even primordial spirit realm experts would struggle to bring him down in a fair battle. But of course, he would still do well to steer clear from leaving aperture realm experts like Hall Master Xing. Still, just cultivating a single realm has taken me 5 concentrated high-tier spirit stones. Without a doubt, the need for spirit stones in my cultivation will only continue to increase. I really have to find a way to earn money. Staring at the white powdery remains on the ground, Zhang Xian rubbed his glabella in vexation. Just when he thought that he had become a tycoon after slaying the 10 kings of the Qing Tian lineage, a short moment of cultivation had put him back into his place as a poor bloke. He really had to find a way to acquire more concentrated high-tier spirit stones, or else his cultivation would stagnate once more. Forget it, I'll deal with it later. For the time being, I need to deal with the trouble Hall Master Xing spoke of first. Let me head to the Fist Division, Palm Division, and Footwork Division to see what they have. Given how generous Hall Master Xing had treated him, it was only right for him to reciprocate the favor. This was how diplomacy usually worked, and as the principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, the Combat Master Hall was an ally he would want to bring over. Understanding this, Zhang Xian walked out of the isolated chamber and headed to the Fist Division. Chapter 1132, 3 days later. Walala. The crisp melody of tea flowing into a cup filled a tranquil room. Hall Master Xing placed the teapot in his hand down before passing a fresh cup of tea over to Elder Qi. Elder Qi took a sip of it, and his eyes immediately lit up. Excellent tea. It's no wonder it's worth such a huge sum. Its quality is definitely worth the fortune spent on it. Hall Master Xing had specially bought these cloud mist flower tea leaves from the Hongyuan Empire. Back then, he had thought that it was a little pricey, and he had only intended to give it a try. However, upon tasting it, he realized that it was really worth its price. It sure is fine tea, isn't it? Hall Master Xing nodded in agreement as he sipped on his cup of tea. Over the past 3 days of hard work, he had managed to further reinforce his cultivation, bringing his state of mind and primordial spirit to a whole new level. At this rate, he would be ready to face the lightning ordeal by the time it fell. Looking at the elder before him, Hall Master Xing asked, "Elder Qi, how has your cultivation been going recently?" The Combat Master Hall's spirit-gathering formation is indeed formidable. Just by cultivating for a short 3 days, I managed to reinforce my half-leaving aperture realm cultivation, Elder Qi said with a stroke of his beard. He had to admit that the training facilities within the Combat Master Hall were truly impressive. If it had been anywhere else, it would have taken at least several months before he fully reinforced his half-leaving aperture realm cultivation. But here, he managed to do it within just 3 days. Admittedly, it would be quite some time before he was ready to push for a breakthrough to leaving aperture realm, but with his body having adapted to his current level of cultivation, he would be able to draw forth incredible might at a wave of his hand. It's only because Elder Qi has a strong foundation. Not just anyone is able to utilize the formation to its full potential as you did, Hall Master Xing remarked. Ultimately, the formation only played an auxiliary role in one's cultivation. What was more important was the cultivator himself. Elder Qi had braved through many threatening situations, and this had elevated his state of mind to a transcendental level, allowing him to advance his cultivation swiftly. In fact, Hall Master Xing suspected that the other party might even be able to clear the trial of inner demons easily. Choosing not to dwell too much on the topic, Elder Qi asked, "How has Sunshi been doing recently?" He had been wanting to formally pay a visit to his benefactor to thank him, but in the past 3 days, he had found that the latter had been working even more diligently than him. In fact, there was hardly anyone who had caught a glimpse of him in the Combat Master Hall. "You know, I really have to admit that Sunshi is a true genius." Hearing that question, Hall Master Xing recalled the various reports he had heard over the past 2 days, and his eyes lit up in agitation. Genius? The first place Sunshi visited was the Fist Division. I presume that you should have heard of the strength-assessing fist pillar there, right? Hall Master Xing asked. Elder Qi nodded. The existence of the strength-assessing fist pillar was no secret in the Qingyuan Empire. In fact, there were quite a few people who would visit the Fist Division in hopes of borrowing it to assess their current strength. It was a saint-tier artifact, and it could accurately gauge one's punching strength. The record for the strength-assessing fist pillar for Saint Tu Dan was left behind by Combat Master Wang Su 8,000 years ago. Combat Master Wang Su was born with incredible strength, and he went on to cultivate the art of drawing oceans and the strongest defensive secret art of our Combat Master Hall, thus strengthening his Jinqi and physical body to an unbelievable level. Usually, clearing even the first puppet is a difficult feat for most combat masters, and yet, after he entered, he immediately triggered all of the puppets into action, and with a palm each, he defeated all 18 of the puppets. All in all, it didn't even take him 10 breaths. He defeated all of the puppets with a palm each? Elder Qi widened his eyes in shock. Indeed. More importantly, the palm type he used corresponded perfectly to each of the puppets. In other words, his palm art changed 18 times within just a short 10 breaths. Hall Master Xing continued. How is that possible? Elder Qi could not help but shudder upon hearing those words. As the wrist was one of the most flexible parts of a human body, palm arts tended to be one of the more complicated and profound battle techniques. Using a gentle palm art and a forceful palm art drew on vastly different strengths, and an abrupt switch between the two could easily lead to severe injuries. Yet, to change to 18 different types within just 10 breaths. Was this really a feat that could be pulled off by a human? Was the other party's body forged of metal, making him impervious to the backlash from the abrupt switches? If it had been Elder Qi himself doing it, he had no doubt that his meridians would have ruptured. The true shocker has yet to come. You should know of our Guardian Division, right? Hall Master Xing asked. Of course I do, Elder Qi replied with a nod. The Guardian Division is known for its divine hammer, which is capable of analyzing the flaws of a cultivator's body and tempering them through hammering, thus enhancing one's defenses. Once all 1,296 acupoints have been tempered, even blades will struggle to slice through one's skin. Through it, the Guardian Division has developed generations of formidable combat masters. If the Weapon Division was the strongest spear in the Combat Master Hall, the Guardian Division was definitely the sturdiest shield of it. Those who could master its heritage would be nigh indestructible on the battlefield. Putting aside arrows, even saint-tier weapons would hardly leave a mark on them. Just like the resilient cockroaches, they were a fearsome force regardless of where they went. Indeed. The Divine Hammer is a Saint Intermediate tier artifact, and it has exceptional capabilities in tempering the human body. However, its strikes produce excruciating pain that permeate deep into the bones, causing normal combat masters to be unable to even withstand a minute of its tempering. Even I am unable to last more than 5 minutes. But when Sun Shi entered the Guardian Hall to allow his body to be tempered by the Divine Hammer, Hall Master Xing clutched his forehead and exclaimed incredulously, he actually fell asleep. He fell asleep. Elder Qi nearly spurted blood. He said that it was simply too comfortable, so he ended up dozing off. Honestly, if not for the fact that we were worried for his health and dragged him out, he might have just slept for several days straight in there. Hall Master Xing said helplessly. When he saw saliva flowing from the corners of Sun Shi's face, he had nearly fainted from horror. Such excruciating hammering, and the other party could actually think of it as a mere massage and relax from it. It was truly inconceivable. After he woke up, he headed to the Footwork Division. In the trial of footwork, there are a total of 122 hidden mechanisms. As soon as one steps into the trial, one will trigger the mechanisms, resulting in a relentless wave of attacks. The further one proceeds into the trial, the more complicated the attacks become, and the harder it is to dodge them, Hall Master Xing explained. Elder Qi nodded in response. The trials of the Combat Master Hall's 10 divisions were deeply feared in the Qingyuan Empire, and this was especially so for the trial of footwork. It assessed one's reflexes, speed, judgment, and many other aspects. If one was lacking in any of those, one would be struck before one knew it. Before entering the trial of footwork, I earnestly warned Sun Shi about the difficulty of the trial for fear that he would be injured by it. Yet, who could have known that, He walked in and out of the entire trial, but he didn't even trigger a single one of the hidden mechanisms. Thus, I forcefully activated all of the hidden mechanisms as soon as he entered the second time around, filling the entire trial with weapons and threats. Yet again, he walked in and out, but he still didn't encounter a single thing. Hall Master Xing looked at the sky with a look of despair and sighed. It was then that I realized that he was simply too fast. Such that even before the hidden mechanisms could do a single thing, he had already passed by all of them. Even the hidden mechanisms didn't have time to react. Elder Qi's body trembled in disbelief. The hidden mechanisms were controlled by a formation within the trial, and they would be triggered as soon as one entered the vicinity of the trap. Yet, to move so fast that even the mechanisms did not have time to process his existence. Just how fast did he move? At such speed, the other party was capable of killing him before he could even perceive the other party's existence. Indeed. The more Hall Master Xing spoke, the deeper the bitterness on his face became. To be able to become the head of a regional combat master hall, it went without saying that he was an incredible genius in his time too. With his talent, he thought that he could easily reach levels beyond his peers as long as he were to put in hard work. But upon seeing Sun Shi, he suddenly realized that his talent was really nothing at all. Before the other party, he was like dirt before the brilliant sun. Just by strolling around in each division for less than 4 hours each, he was able to accomplish achievements that were unmatched by any predecessors and probably by many future generations to come as well. Genius was no longer sufficient to describe him. In fact, even monstrous seemed to be a little inadequate. On the other hand, after hearing Hall Master Xing's story, Elder Qi's mouth was wide open. He had thought that even if Sun Shi was able to make some advancement in his fighting prowess over the past 3 days, it would surely have been minimal. No one could have imagined that he would be able to cook up such a huge commotion. It took a long time before Elder Qi was able to calm down his agitated mind, and taking a deep breath, he said, "It seems like you have really chosen the right person this time around. Sun Shi shouldn't have any problem dealing with the huge trouble you spoke of." After the past few days of interaction with Hall Master Xing, he had learned what the huge trouble was. For a student faction of a Tier 1 Empire's Master Teacher Academy to be able to force their combat master hall to such a desperate state, it had to be said that the rumored Principal Zhang did live up to his reputation. Even though he had never met Principal Zhang in person, just by looking at the strength of the Xianxian faction, he knew that it would be unwise to underestimate the other party's strength. Indeed. I was still worried if Sun Shi would be able to match Principal Zhang, but honestly, after seeing what Sun Shi has accomplished so far, I am really unable to fathom an opponent who would be able to match him. After venting out the shock he had accumulated over the past few days, Hall Master Xing finally felt as if a huge burden had been lifted from his heart, and a smile returned to his lips. Having seen the Xianxian faction's strength with his own eyes, it was inevitable that he was apprehensive about going against an opponent like Principal Zhang. However, after witnessing the peerless strength that Sun Shi had displayed, all worries had vanished from his mind. If a 6-star master teacher like Principal Zhang could defeat even a monster of Sun Shi's caliber, the Combat Master Hall might as well be replaced with the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. That's good. I am also interested to see Sun Shi using his strength to surpass the undefeatable legend of the Hongyuan Empire. Elder Qi nodded with a smile. Taking a glance at the sky outside, Hall Master Xing said as he stood up, looking at the time, the members of the Xianxian faction should be arriving very soon. Let me invite Sun Shi over. Today was the day that the Combat Master Hall would be holding an exchange with the Xianxian faction, and the latter should have been on their way over at that moment. The Xianxian faction was a huge headache, but Hall Master Xing did not think that they would lose in the exchange. After all, there was far more to a battle than just combat skills. Let me head there with you, Elder Qi said as he stood up as well, and they began making their way out. Shortly after they left the room, Division Head Liao walked up to them. Noting that Division Head Liao was alone, Hall Master Xing asked with a frown, "Where is Sun Shi?" He said that it was still early, so, He went to the Soul Division first. Division Head Liao replied. Soul Division. Hall Master Xing froze for a brief moment before his face turned ghastly pale. The trial of soul in the Soul Division is managed by the Saint Four Dan Chrysoprase Soul Beast. Our combat master Hall had to pay a heavy price to invite it over. This is bad. Chrysoprase Soul Beast? Elder Qi pondered for a moment. That saint beast is indeed born with a powerful soul, allowing them to easily knock out anyone. Are you afraid that Sun Shi will be knocked out ahead of the exchange? That's not it. I'm afraid that he will tame the Chrysoprase Soul Beast. Hall Master Xing exclaimed anxiously. Elder Qi. Chapter 1133, he started it. If the Heart Division was the most mysterious division of the Combat Master Hall, the most bizarre division was probably the Soul Division. In the trial of soul, a cultivator could temper their soul. However, a moment of carelessness could potentially place one in a disoriented state, temporarily robbing them of their ability to think rationally. Zhang Xian pushed open the door and entered the trial. As soon as he took a step in, he immediately heard a slight moaning sound by his ear, as if an aggrieved ghost was crying beside him. That crying seemed to capture the entirety of one's attention, causing one to forget one's initial purpose. Zhang Xian frowned as he halted his footsteps. It's a type of demonic tune. He had encountered a situation similar to this back at the Qiu Wu Palace as well. When used in the correct circumstances, demonic tunes could prove to be extremely dangerous, rendering one incapable of discerning fiction from reality. However, against Zhang Xian, a cultivator of the Heaven's Path divine art, its effects were minimal. Driving his Jinqi around his body, the effects of the demonic tunes immediately vanished without a trace. Through paying closer attention to the moaning sound, he was able to determine the general direction it was coming from, so he began heading in that direction. The trial of soul was significantly larger than the trial of inner breath and trial of martial arts, spanning a radius of roughly 50 meters. However, as it was completely dark, it was impossible to determine where one was heading. Even one's spiritual perception was inhibited by the formation within, leaving one unable to perceive too far ahead. Slowly proceeding forward, Zhang Xian advanced for around 20 meters before his body abruptly jolted slightly. An oppressive pressure had suddenly assaulted him, seemingly attempting to tear his soul apart. A soul attack. Zhang Xian was taken aback for a moment before coming to a realization. It seems like someone is controlling the trial. If it had just been a simple trial, it was impossible for the formation to realize so swiftly that the demonic tune was not working and resort to a soul attack instead. For most cultivators, such a soul attack would cause them such excruciating pain that they would not be able to move at all. However, for Zhang Xian, such a soul attack was truly trivial. Putting aside the fact that he was protected by his Heaven's Path Jinqi, just the sheer size and strength of his soul made that pressure completely ineffective on him. The more Zhang Xian advanced forward, the greater the pressure became. At this point, even a Saint 3 Dan cultivator would have already succumbed to the immense pressure. Taking another 2 steps forward, Zhang Xian finally identified the source of the pressure, and he chuckled softly. It'd be rude if I didn't reciprocate the favor to you. Why don't you try mine? Zhang Xian's voice was not too loud, but it sounded clearly throughout the trial. The following moment, an overwhelming surge of soul energy burst forth from his glabella. Even though he did not have any soul cultivation techniques beyond Saint Realm, the soul tempering that he had undergone during the Saint Ascension ordeal had condensed his soul considerably, such that it had assumed a lucid crystalline form. With the enhanced strength of his soul, he was able to exert a pressure many times greater than before. Hong Long. In an instant, it was as if the air had turned as viscous as mercury. An incredible pressure burst forth, directed toward the source of the soul. Bam! Kacha! The loud thud reminiscent of something falling heavily to the ground, accompanied with the sound of many things shattering simultaneously, echoed resoundingly in the air. At the same time, the ground also tremored intensely. It was true that the other party's soul was powerful, but it was still severely lacking compared to his. A soul attack. Who are you? The next moment, a furious voice boomed in the room. Following which, Zhang Xian saw a massive saint beast walking out of the shadows. That saint beast was probably the one who had attacked him earlier. Under the immense pressure exerted by Zhang Xian's soul, it had probably lost its balance for a moment and fallen to the ground, shattering many things beneath it. You are a chrysoprase soul beast? Upon taking a look, Zhang Xian matched the distinctive traits of the saint beast before him with the books he had browsed through, and he could not help but frown. The chrysoprase soul beast was a rather peculiar saint beast. Unlike most saint beasts, which relied heavily on their superior physical bodies in combat, the chrysoprase soul beast specialized in soul offense instead. Blessed with an innately powerful soul, it could easily produce hallucinations and leave its opponents in a disoriented state. It was an extremely rare beast, and not even the Beast Tamer Guild had seen many of them in its entire history. It was rather unexpected to see this rare beast in the Combat Master Hall. This knowledge swiftly flashed through Zhang Xian's mind before he answered the other party's question. I am a master teacher who is here to challenge this trial. You are a master teacher? The chrysoprase soul beast snorted. Deep hostility flickered across its massive eyes as it sneered. How could a master teacher possibly be skilled in the means of the soul oracles? Speak, who are you? Zhang Xian was stunned for a brief moment after hearing those words, but he swiftly recovered and replied with a smile. Soul Oracle. You must have misunderstood me somehow. The heritage of the soul oracles had vanished from the master-teacher continent several dozen millenniums ago. As such, not even master teachers would be able to identify it with certainty even if he utilized the means of a soul oracle before them. He had not really thought that the chrysoprase soul beast would be able to recognize it with a single look. It was not a crime to inherit the heritage of the soul oracles, but ultimately, just like poison arts, soul arts were viewed as unorthodox and depraved, and they were deeply feared throughout the master-teacher continent. In order to avoid trouble, it was best for Zhang Xian not to admit to it. Hearing Zhang Xian denying the matter, the chrysoprase soul beast scoffed coldly. Don't bother lying to me. I have seen soul oracles in action before, and I know their means very well. The next instant, Zhang Xian suddenly felt overwhelming soul energy crushing heavily down on him, seemingly trying to smash him into smithereens. I was just born with a powerful soul, I am not a soul oracle, Zhang Xian replied with a frown. The pressure that the other party weighed down on Zhang Xian like an immense mountain, threatening to crush him into bits. Any cultivator who had yet to reach primordial spirit realm would surely have caved in to such pressure instantly. However, to Zhang Xian, it was truly nothing at all. Seeing that his soul attack was completely ineffective against the young man before it, the eyes of the chrysoprase soul beast narrowed slightly, and it harumphed coldly. Soul oracles are capable of drawing of their souls out and surviving independently. The truth will be clear once I shatter your physical body. With a furious roar, it abruptly leaped forward, and a massive claw flew toward Zhang Xian. See la. The furious momentum of the claws produced a sharp, shrill sound, leaving one's hairs standing on end. It felt as if it would mercilessly rip anything before it in two. Not expecting the other party to suddenly launch a lethal assault against him, Zhang Xian's eyebrows knitted together in displeasure. His feet swiftly took a few steps backward with amazing agility, thus dodging the other party's assault perfectly. Over the past 3 days, Zhang Xian had made his way through the 10 divisions of the Combat Master Hall and collected whatever books they had in them. With his newly collected books, he was able to compile several higher-tier Heaven's Path battle techniques. Regardless of whether it was the might of his fists, the strength of his palm, or the sturdiness of his defenses, they had been elevated to a whole new level. If he was only a match against primordial spirit realm cultivators 3 days ago, the current him could be said to be invincible among primordial spirit realm cultivators. Or to put it in simpler terms, any cultivator who had not reached half-leaving aperture realm would not be a match for him. And among all his battle techniques, the improvement in his movement technique was the greatest. After collecting all of the books in the footwork division, he had finally managed to perfect the one Dan of the Unbound Voyager into a Heaven's Path battle technique, and he had immediately cultivated it on the spot. It was through the Unbounded Voyager that he was able to move so fast that not even the hidden mechanisms had been able to perceive his presence. "Where do you think you are going?" Seeing that the young man had escaped from its claws, the chrysoprase soul beast bellowed furiously as it raised its claws once more. A formation word into action, and in the blink of an eye, the trial of soul was completely sealed. There was no way to escape anymore. Voila! After sealing the surroundings, the chrysoprase soul beast immediately launched another series of attacks against the young man before it. On the other hand, after dodging several lethal attacks from the Saint Beast before him, Zhang Xian's patience finally wore thin, and he shook his head. If a fight is what you want, a fight is what you'll get. As his figure blurred, Zhang Xian appeared by the side of the chrysoprase soul beast in the blink of an eye before shooting a powerful fist toward the latter. Pang! Under the staggering might of Zhang Xian's fist, the chrysoprase soul beast's figure retreated swiftly before crashing heavily into the roof above. Its figure then plummeted heavily back to the ground, and a huge pool of fresh blood flowed out of its mouth. So weak? Zhang Xian was startled by how easily he had managed to subdue the other party for a moment before he recalled the unique trait of the Saint Beast. Chrysoprase soul beasts were blessed with powerful souls at birth, but their physical strength and resilience could only be considered average, possibly only at the level of an ordinary cultivator. There was no way it could withstand the might of his Heaven's Path fist art. As such, with just a single strike, it was already severely wounded. Zhang Xian shook his head. "I accidentally used too much strength." Even though the other party had tried to kill him, he was ultimately still the guardian of the trial of soul. It would be hard for him to explain this to the combat master hall if it died after facing him. Furthermore, it was due to the other party's doubts that he was a soul oracle that it had made a move on him, and considering the association of the soul oracles with the otherworldly demons, its actions were not completely unjustified. Shaking his head, Zhang Xian slowly walked toward the chrysoprase soul beast. "I guess I'll have to try saving it then." While making their way toward the soul division, Division Head Liao said with a casual wave of his hand, "Hall Master Xing, the situation can't be as exaggerated as you make it out to be. The chrysoprase soul beast has a gentle personality, it's unlikely that it will get into a conflict with Sunshur." The chrysoprase soul beast was the Saint Beast responsible for managing the trial of soul. While it would use demonic tunes and soul pressure to temper the challengers, it was actually a mild-mannered and meticulous individual. In the time that it had managed the trial of soul, there had never been a single mishap. Furthermore, it was not like Sunshur had intentionally entered the trial of soul to wreak havoc. No matter how he looked at it, the chances of a conflict breaking out between the both of them was truly unlikely. I honestly hope for that to be the case, too. You also know how far I had to go in order to convince the chrysoprase soul beast to become the guardian of the trial of soul. I can't allow anything to go wrong at this point, Hall Master Xing said with a bitter smile. He also wished that nothing bad would happen, but Sunshur was simply too exceptional an individual. Every single time he challenged a trial, he would either break several records or cause a huge ruckus. Given so, he could not help but worry that the latter would somehow end up fighting against the chrysoprase soul beast. The combat master hall could not have either of them getting injured at this point in time. The three of them swiftly arrived at the soul division and entered the trial of soul. Pushing open the door, they stepped into the trial, and the very first thing they saw was a giant chrysoprase soul beast lying on the ground with its tongue sticking out from its mouth. Blood was trickling down from the edge of its mouth, forming a crimson puddle on the ground. Sunshur, what happened here? Not expecting his worst fears to actually come true, Hall Master Xing's cheeks twitched uncontrollably. At this point, he really felt like crying. Hearing those words, Zhang Xian turned around and saw the trio. A sheepish look crept onto his face as he asked, "Why are you all here?" "We were afraid that you might get into a conflict with the Chrysoprase soul beast." Hall Master Xing swiftly tried to mediate the situation. "I know that it might have attacked you, but that is its responsibility as the guardian of the trial of soul. It isn't trying to pick on you or anything." He had rushed there in hopes of preventing any conflict between the duo, but he had ended up being a step too late. Furthermore, from the looks of it, it seemed like the Chrysoprase soul beast had been done in real bad. It did not seem like it would recover anytime soon. If only that were the case. Seeing Hall Master Xing speaking up on behalf of the Chrysoprase soul beast, Zhang Xian shook his head. He was just about to begin explaining what had happened previously when the eyes of the Chrysoprase soul beast suddenly opened wide. It exclaimed anxiously, "Hall Master Xing, don't listen to his words. He's a so," but before it could finish its words, a certain young man had already sunk his feet into its face. Pang! Its words were stifled back into its throat as its massive body flew several dozen meters away before crashing back onto the ground. The floor of the Combat Master Hall was constructed of an extremely resilient material, but the impact of the Chrysoprase soul beast's fall still created a huge web of cracks on the ground. Its teeth plopped all around the ground as its head twisted to the side. It had fainted. Sun Shi. Not expecting the young man to kick the Chrysoprase soul beast flying right before their eyes, Hall Master Xing and the others were stupefied. Panicked, they quickly turned to the young man, only to see the latter looking back at them with a helpless shrug. "If I were to say that it made the first move, would you believe me?" Hall Master Xing. Division Head Liao. Elder Qi. Chapter 1134, Who is the opponent whom I need to defeat? Hall Master Xing and the others felt as if they were on the brink of insanity. "We saw you kicking the Chrysoprase soul beast in its face with our own eyes, you nearly killed it with that blow. And yet, you are telling us that it made the first move? Has anyone ever spouted such bullshit before? Just how on earth did it offend you that you have to go so far against it? Was there a need for a genius like you to get so serious against a beast?" Sighing deeply, Hall Master Xing explained, "Sun Shi, if the Chrysoprase soul beast has offended you in any way, I beseech you to forgive it. The Combat Master Hall had to pay a hefty price before we managed to convince it to become the guardian of the trial of soul. If something happens to it, the operations of the Soul Division will be affected." "Who?" As Zhang Xian had expected, the other party really did not believe his words. Knowing that it would not make a difference no matter how much he argued, he shook his head and said, "I understand. I'll help you treat it then." Seeing that Sun Shi did not hold any hostility toward the Chrysoprase soul beast, Hall Master Xing heaved a sigh of relief. "It's fine. Our Combat Master Hall has top-notch medicine to deal with injuries. I'll just get my men to bring some over. There's no need to waste good medicine for this. Allow me to treat it instead," Zhang Xian said. "Don't worry, I am a physician too. I won't stoop so low as to harm my patient." "Ah, I nearly forgot that Sun Shi is a formidable physician too." Hall Master Xing came to a realization, and he burst into a hearty laughter. The man before him was a formidable physician who could treat a poison that even Elder Qi was helpless before. With him treating the Chrysoprase soul beast, it should not be long before the latter was nursed to full health. Indeed, Sun Shi's medicinal skills are nothing short of amazing. Considering that the Chrysoprase soul beast has only sustained physical wounds, it shouldn't be a problem for him. Elder Qi nodded. It would be a pleasure to see Sun Shi's medicinal skill in action. But as he said those words, his smile abruptly froze as his words came to a halt. Right before his eyes, he saw the young man walking up to the Chrysoprase soul beast and kicking it forcefully once more. Pang! The Chrysoprase soul beast flew right into the sky once more. Elder Qi, Hall Master Xing, and Division Head Liao. Didn't you say that you are a physician and you wouldn't stoop so low as to harm a patient? Didn't you say that you are going to treat it? Is there a physician in a world who treats their patient like that? The trio nearly burst into tears. Unable to stand it any longer, Hall Master Xing dashed forward and grabbed the hand of the young man before him and asked with a deep frown, "Sun Shi, just what on earth do you want?" If not for the fact that the other party was a benefactor to him and the combat master Hall, he would have definitely sent the other party flying with a slap at this very moment. Pang! With his hand grabbed by Hall Master Xing, Zhang Xian had no choice but to stop what he was doing. He turned around and faced Hall Master Xing with a peeved look on his face and said, "Hall Master Xing, I am in the midst of my treatment. Move aside." Ah! Hall Master Xing was slightly taken aback by Zhang Xian's forceful words. Before he could respond to those words, the chrysoprase soul beast suddenly rose to its feet and walked up to Zhang Xian before lowering its body subserviently. "Sun Shi, bro son, grandpa son, won't you kick me a few more times? As long as you give me a few more good kicks, I'll even acknowledge you as my master." Hall Master, Division Head Liao, and Elder Qi. Hall Master Xing was afraid that the chrysoprase soul beast would leave the combat master Hall out of rage from a conflict with Sun Shi, and that was why he had rushed over as soon as possible to mediate between the both of them. Yet, who would have thought that the chrysoprase soul beast would actually have an extraordinary interest in pain? As long as he kicks you, you will even go as far to acknowledge him as your master. The heck? When I recruited you over back then, you were so arrogant, as if you were the master of the world. Why are you so subservient now? Are those who specialize in soul arts as perverted as you are? Wait a moment, isn't this an opportunity as well? If I can get it to acknowledge me as its master, I won't need to worry about it leaving the combat master Hall anymore, right? After pondering for a moment, Hall Master Xing walked up to the chrysoprase soul beast and cleared his throat. Ahem. Chrysoprase soul beast, why don't you acknowledge me as your master instead? I'll kick you whenever you desire it. Chrysoprase soul beast. Zhang Xian. Ignoring the sudden eccentric words from Hall Master Xing, Zhang Xian turned to the chrysoprase soul beast and said, "By now, you should know that I am not a soul oracle, right?" The chrysoprase soul beast's lips twitched slightly as it quickly replied. Of course you're not. If you were to say that the other party was a soul oracle once more, it might just be killed on the spot. Hearing those words, Hall Master Xing turned to the duo and asked, "Soul oracle? What are the both of you talking about?" Due to my abnormally powerful soul, it thought that I was a soul oracle and made a move against me, Zhang Xian explained. You suspected Sun Shi of being a soul oracle? Hall Master Xing turned to the chrysoprase soul beast and shook his head. You must be misunderstanding something here. Sun Shi over here is a particularly formidable spirit awakener, and that's why his soul may appear to be abnormally powerful. In fact, he was the one who helped treat the huge rift in my primordial spirit. He's a spirit awakener. The chrysoprase soul beast was stunned for a moment before awkwardness spread across its face. Despite their differing field of specialties, spirit awakeners had a deep understanding of souls just like soul oracles. Otherwise, there was no way they would have been able to enchant weapons, nourish souls, and reinforce primordial spirits. To think that he would actually suspect a spirit awakener of being a soul oracle and even make a move on the other party. Seeing that the other party no longer doubted him, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. At this point, he could not help but recall a particularly intriguing piece of information he had heard from the other party, so he asked, "I remember that you said earlier that you have met a soul oracle, but didn't the soul oracles go extinct many years ago?" For it to have witnessed the means of a soul oracle in person, could it be that there were other soul oracles who had survived the wrath of the master teachers? That's what I thought too. But a few decades ago, back when I was still traveling around the world, I encountered a soul oracle. He possessed exceptionally powerful means that allowed him to devour the souls of others to nourish his own. With my own eyes, I saw the soul of a good friend of mine being consumed, and I was nearly devoured myself. It is only due to my powerful soul that I was able to withstand his soul art and escape. This is also why I got particularly agitated when I saw you utilizing means reminiscent of a soul art and acted recklessly. Please do pardon me for that, the chrysoprase soul beast said. Hearing those words, Zhang Xian frowned. There was indeed a soul art that allowed one to devour the souls of others to nourish their own. However, that was an extremely depraved technique, so Zhang Xian had opted not to learn it. Where did you encounter the soul oracle? Zhang Xian asked. The chrysoprase soul beast pondered for a brief moment before replying. I encountered the soul oracle in the marshlands of the northern meadows. The marshlands of the northern meadows? Zhang Xian was startled. Could it be related to Vicious? Back then, when Sang Su attempted to kill him back in the trial of inner demons, he had used soul search on the other party and learned that Vicious had a body part hidden in the marshlands of the northern meadows. For the chrysoprase soul beast to say that he had encountered a soul oracle there, it seemed too much of a coincidence for the both matters to not be related to one another. There are soul oracles in the marshlands of the northern meadows? Why have you never spoken of it before? Hall Master Xing's face darkened. The duty of the combat masters was not only in fending off the otherworldly demons but to protect mankind as well. If a soul oracle capable of consuming souls appeared, it was their responsibility to defeat them. I intended to do so, but it's a pity that the combat master hall has no one who stands a chance against him at all. If I had spoken of it, it would just have resulted in unneeded deaths of combat masters, the chrysoprase soul beast replied. This. Hall Master Xing's face reddened. Clearly, the chrysoprase soul beast lacked confidence in the combat master Hall's strength. Hall Master Xing, there's no need for you to feel embarrassed by this. The means of the soul oracles are extremely difficult to deal with. Putting aside unprepared combat masters, it would be difficult for you to deal with the soul oracle even if you headed there personally. As the chrysoprase soul beast spoke, hostility surfaced in its eyes. In fact, I only chose to accept your invitation to the soul division back then in hopes of tempering your combat master's souls and my own so as to exact vengeance for my good friend one day. Seeing its state, Hall Master Xing nodded in realization. It was no wonder the chrysoprase soul beast had never spoken about any further remuneration over these years. It seemed like its main purpose at the soul division was to avenge the friend whom it had lost to the soul oracle back then. Zhang Xian pondered for a moment before asking, "Can you explain the situation to me? If the other party is truly a soul oracle, I might be of some help." His soul cultivation had already hit a bottleneck due to lack of further soul cultivation techniques. Thus, it was about time for him to search for new ones, and this could very well be an opportunity for him. Besides, considering that this matter was likely related to Vicious, there was a need for him to head over there personally. Hearing those words, the eyes of the chrysoprase soul beast lit up. Given that the strength of Sun Shi's soul exceeds even mine, it would be great if you could help us defeat that soul oracle. Over the years, it had assessed many combat masters, but not a single one had been able to satisfy its demand. On the other hand, even though the person before it was still young, his soul was exceptionally powerful, such that even it was not a match for his soul. If the other party could help it in dealing with the soul oracle, they might be able to subdue him. My friend was a verdant cloak beast, and his cultivation had reached primordial spirit realm, just like me. We heard that the marshlands of the northern meadows had afloat soul flowers, which are rumored to be able to enhance one's soul significantly upon consumption. Thus, we headed there together. However, before we could find the afloat soul flowers, we met that soul oracle and ended up fighting him. He was unable to match the both of us, so he turned around and fled. However, in the middle of the night, he assaulted us in his soul form, and with a bellow, he extracted my friend's soul from his body and captured it. I tried every single method at my disposal, but I was unable to retrieve my friend's soul from his grasp. Eventually, I could only watch with my eyes as he devoured my friend's soul whole. After that, he tried to capture my soul as well. However, fortunately, due to my powerful innate soul, I was able to withstand his soul art and flee. Otherwise, I would have lost my life there as well. Recalling the situation back then, the chrysoprase soul beast could not help but feel a little frightened. As a master of soul arts itself, it knew how frightening soul oracles were. Soul arts might have appeared to be relatively weaker in a direct battle, but due to their elusive nature, it was nearly impossible to guard against them. If a soul oracle put their mind to it, they could easily draw out the soul of another in the middle of their dreams. With just a bellow, he was able to draw out your friend's soul. Zhang Xian frowned. There was no record of such a formidable soul art from the heritage he had obtained from Mo Hunsheng. The chrysoprase soul beast nodded. Indeed. Just by calling out the name of my friend, the soul oracle was able to extract his soul. No matter how my friend retaliated or how I tried to save him, it didn't work at all. Recalling the various means he possessed as well, Zhang Xian nodded in agreement. It's indeed difficult to guard against the means of a soul oracle. Just as he was about to continue speaking, Division Head Wei suddenly rushed into the room. Hall Master Xing, they are here. They are here. Hall Master Xing nodded. Sun Shi, let's discuss this matter later. The big trouble that I told you about previously is here. Great. I have been wanting to meet the man who dared provoke the combat master Hall. Don't worry, I will have his teeth knocked out for you. Zhang Xian nodded. Following behind Hall Master Xing, they swiftly left the Soul Division, and before long, they arrived before a vast square. Before they could enter the square, an excited exclaim suddenly sounded. Teacher, we have been looking all around for you. Turning around, Zhang Xian saw Wang Ying and Zheng Yang rushing up to him. Behind them, the many members of the Xianxian faction were lined up neatly. Upon seeing Zhang Xian, they immediately clasped their fists and greeted him. Principal Zhang. You came at a good time. It happens that I'm about to clash with an expert, so it'd be good for you to watch carefully. Zhang Xian nodded. He had been thinking of asking Hall Master Xing to allow the members of the Xianxian faction to spectate the battle as well. After all, it would be a good learning opportunity for them. However, considering how gravely Hall Master Xing regarded the matter, it did not seem right for him to turn it into a spectacle for others. But since the entire Xianxian faction was already there, he was spared from the dilemma. You are going to clash with an expert? Who is it? Wang Ying asked curiously. It's with. Wait a moment, let me ask first. It was only at this moment that Zhang Xian realized that he still did not know whom his opponent was. Thus, turning to face Hall Master Xing, he asked with a polite smile, Hall Master Xing, may I know whom the big trouble is? Who is the opponent whom I need to defeat? Chapter 1135, What? I am the big trouble. Till now, Hall Master Xing had always referred to that person as Big Trouble, and he had not said who the person was. As such, Zhang Xian had no idea who the other party was. All he knew was that the other party was an extremely skilled individual who possessed fighting prowess at the peak of his cultivation realm. As one who had cultivated the Heaven's Path divine art, he was confident that he would be able to subdue any opponent in the same cultivation realm easily, but he did not believe that he was truly invincible. After all, his clone was always around to remind him not to get complacent. Since his clone was able to attain strength far greater than him, surely there would be some amazingly talented cultivators in the world who might have been able to do the same. As such, from the start to the end, he had never doubted that the big trouble Hall Master Xing referred to could have been referring to him. After all, he had never met with anyone from the Combat Master Hall in his identity as the principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy ever since he arrived in Qingyuan Empire, so how could he possibly be the big trouble the other party was talking about? Furthermore, from the tone Hall Master Xing assumed, it was apparent that the Combat Master Hall was facing a great adversary, which further served to convince Zhang Xian's subconscious mind that it could not possibly be him. After all, he was a humble individual who could not get any more low profile. Ever since he arrived in the Qingyuan Empire, all he did was pay a visit to the Spirit Awakener Guild, so it did not make sense for a leaving Aperture Realm expert like Hall Master Xing to be so worried about him. After asking, Zhang Xian waited patiently to hear from Hall Master Xing whom that formidable expert was, only to see the leaving Aperture Realm cultivator's mouth twitching non-stop. His body staggered weakly from side to side, and it seemed as if he would collapse to the ground at any moment. At this point, the thought of killing himself even flashed across Hall Master Xing's mind. After everything he had done to guard against the Xianxian faction, it turned out that the other party's commander had already infiltrated their camp, converting nearly all of the combat masters into his students. To think that he was so naive as to believe that he had managed to find himself an expert to defeat Principal Zhang and resolve the crisis the combat master Hall was currently facing. They had even gone to the extent of allowing Sun Shi to learn their heritages, only to find out that he was actually Zhang Xian at this point in time. Not only did he fail to resolve the crisis, he even turned it into a catastrophe. A mouthful of blood welled up at the back of Hall Master Xing's throat, ready to spew forth at any moment. Hall Master Xing turned around to look at Elder Qi, only to see that the latter had a flabbergasted look on his face as well. Back then, he had wanted to see Principal Zhang's painting, which Shu Qingfeng had sent in, and compare it with Sun Shi to verify if they were the same person. However, Elder Qi had happened to arrive at that moment and confirmed that Sun Shi was his benefactor. He had guaranteed that Sun Shi could not possibly be Principal Zhang. From the looks of it now, it seemed that Elder Qi had no idea what was going on either. If you don't know, don't make blind guarantees. Look at the trouble you have landed us in. If only he knew this would happen, he would not have taken Elder Qi's word for it. It just so happened that Feng Sun, Jiang Yuan, and the others were cultivating in isolation at the moment, saying that they wanted to condition themselves so as to face the Xianxian faction at full strength. Everything had happened so coincidentally that it seemed as if the heavens had planned the doom of their combat master Hall themselves. Clutching his chest, Hall Master Xing felt his breathing becoming more and more unstable. He felt like he was a true fool. All of those schemes he had come up with to fend against the Xianxian faction ended up as nothing more than a joke. If anything, it had only hastened the downfall of their combat master Hall. Why did life have to be so difficult? Unable to stand it any longer, Hall Master Xing asked, "You are Principal Zhang? Then why did you call yourself Sun Chang?" Not expecting the other party to ask this question instead of revealing whom to beat up, Zhang Xian was slightly taken aback. Sighing deeply, he spoke in a tone reminiscent of an expert attempting to conceal himself in the mortal world. "I don't like to cause trouble or stand out too much. After I enchanted the Spirit Awakener Guild, I didn't want to bring unneeded trouble to the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy as a result of that, so I decided to adopt another persona instead." It was truly a trouble being too outstanding, he could not even conceal his true identity when he wanted to. How frustrating. Pooh. Upon hearing those words and seeing how the other party was acting, blood spewed out of Hall Master Xing's mouth, and his breathing became even more unstable. "You said that you don't like to cause trouble or stand out. Low profile. Low profile your head. Over the 3 days you have spent in our combat master hall, the ruckus and commotion you have caused never halted at any single point in time. You even went to the extent of turning almost all of our combat masters into your students. If not for the fact that you were too busy cultivating and challenging the trials, perhaps our combat master hall might have become yours by now. Every single time you challenged a trial, you just had to create a record that left others deep in despair, and you call that being low profile? There is no one in the world who could be more high profile than you. Hall Master Xing, what's wrong?" Seeing the leaving Aperture Realm expert before him abruptly spurting blood in the middle of a conversation, Zhang Xian worriedly checked on him as he stepped forward, wanting to help Hall Master Xing. "You." Looking at the innocent look on the other party's face, Hall Master Xing felt so angered that he could have erupted. However, he eventually forcefully suppressed it. To be honest, he could not blame Principal Zhang for this either. In the first place, he was the one who went to the Spirit Awakener Guild to engage the other party's help. Besides, the other party had no obligation to report his true identity either, especially to a stranger like him. And more importantly, the other party had agreed to help him get rid of the huge trouble out of goodwill. It was a pity that the heavens seemed to be playing a trick on them, resulting in such an awkward situation. It's nothing, I'm just a little short on breath. Hall Master Xing waved his hand and rejected Zhang Xian's help. Still unwilling to accept the truth, he asked once more, "You really are Zhang Xian?" "That's right. I apologize for concealing this matter from you, but it was not my intention to lie to you," Zhang Xian replied. "All right then." Hall Master Xing's face turned reddened further, and his breathing grew even more erratic. Noticing that there was something amiss with Hall Master Xing's state, Zhang Xian frowned. "Hall Master Xing, is there something wrong? You were still perfectly fine a moment ago, or could it be that big trouble has already made a move on you?" To make a move right before his eyes without him noticing, it seemed like the big trouble was far stronger than he had anticipated. Cough cough. Unable to watch on the situation any longer, Division Head Liao stepped forward and said, "Principal Zhang, the big trouble that Hall Master Xing is referring to, is actually you." He feared that if this situation were to continue, their Hall Master might just die from sheer frustration. "What?" Zhang Xian was startled. "I am the big trouble." "That's right." Seeing how the other party was completely oblivious to the matter, Division Head Liao nodded helplessly. "But when you first mentioned the trouble in the Spirit Awakener Guild, I had not even been to the Combat Master Hall, and I haven't met any of you before either." Zhang Xian was completely bewildered by the situation. "Who?" "You will have to ask them for this matter," Division Head Liao said as he pointed to Wang Ying and the others. Frowning, Zhang Xian turned to his two direct disciples and asked authoritatively, "What did you two do this time around to make the Combat Master Hall so angry?" "We." Wang Ying's face reddened as she said, "Some of the combat masters in the Combat Master Hall didn't abide by the rules and sneaked over to our accommodation to challenge us ahead of the exchange. As such, they ended up being pummeled by our Xianxian faction. After that, they insisted on joining us, so we welcomed them with open arms and taught them the battle techniques and combat skills that you have taught us. That's all. From the very start, the purpose of this exchange is to learn from one another, so, this shouldn't be any problem at all." Zhang Xian frowned. If the members of both organizations were just challenging and learning from one another, it should have been no big deal at all. Was there a need for Hall Master Xing and the others to label him as Big Trouble and even display such deep fear for him? Cough cough. Actually, the combat masters that joined the Xianxian faction aren't just limited to ordinary members. It seems there are 5 division heads too. They were impressed by your teachings, so they joined the Xianxian faction as well. Seeing that his teacher was still a little bewildered by the situation, Lu Yang elaborated further on the matter. "Even the division heads have joined our Xianxian faction." Zhang Xian's lips twitched. He finally understood what was going on. This was no longer a problem of whether they joined the Xianxian faction or not, but that the dignity of the Combat Master Hall was at stake. No wonder the Combat Master Hall regarded him as their top enemy. Who would have thought that within just 3 short days, this group of rascals would dare to do something so preposterous? How infuriating. You all. Truly preposterous. It's out of goodwill that the Combat Master Hall agreed to have an exchange with us, so how can you poach their members? Is this the right way to treat our friends? Regardless of whether we are master teachers or not, we must abide by our morals and conduct ourselves appropriately. Even if the division heads willingly join the Xianxian faction, it's not right to bring them into the Xianxian faction. Is this how I have taught you all this while? You are ruining the valiant reputation I have built up for myself. How am I to face our friends in the Combat Master Hall in the future? Zhang Xian began to berate Wang Ying and the others from the Xianxian faction furiously. But before he could finish his words, the many combat masters behind Hall Master Xing finally arrived at the square. Over the past few days, Zhang Xian had been too busy cultivating and challenging trials, so they had not been able to consult him on the problems that they had. Thus, upon seeing him standing in the middle of the square, they could not hold themselves back any longer. The entire group rushed forward excitedly and kneeled onto the ground. Paying respects to teacher Wang Ying, Lu Yang, everyone from the Xianxian faction. "3 days wasn't long, but it was still sufficient for him to make substantial improvement. All in all, his fighting prowess had increased by at least twofold. We are willing to join the Xianxian faction as well. We humbly ask of you to teach us as well." Seeing how swiftly their companions had improved under the tutelage of the Xianxian faction, the other combat masters couldn't hold themselves back any longer. "Hi! Who could have thought that the 10,000 years of legacy of the Qingyuan Empire Combat Master Hall would be destroyed in my hands?" Seeing the sight before him, Hall Master Xing knew that there was nothing he could do anymore. A look of defeat reminiscent of a failed examinee surfaced on his face, and an ache so sharp that it rendered him unable to breathe assaulted his heart. As the Hall Master, it was a failure in itself for him to be unable to bring the Combat Master Hall to greater heights under his leadership, let alone the absorption of the Combat Master Hall into an organization from a Tier 1 empire. He had prepared himself for the worst to come, but seeing it happen before his eyes was nevertheless heart-wrenching. "Hall Master Xing, there's no need for you to blame yourself. This matter is not a bad thing to our Combat Master Hall, on the contrary, it could even be considered as a blessing." At this point, Feng Sun suddenly arrived on the square. He had been in seclusion ever since he heard of the arrival of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy 3 days ago, intending to prepare himself to pull off a great comeback during the exchange. Yet, when he finally came out of his seclusion, this was the shocking sight that welcomed him. It was inevitable that he would feel slightly rattled within. However, recalling the various incredible feats that Principal Zhang had pulled off previously, this matter didn't seem to be too surprising anymore. In fact, he felt a little relieved even. He wasn't aware that Zhang Xian had managed to become a celestial saint, but the various affairs that they had gone through together in the Qiu Wu Palace was still fresh on his mind. Without a doubt, there was no harm to maintaining such close ties with an organization headed by a master teacher as formidable as the other party. With this layer of relationship, their Combat Master Hall would surely develop swiftly, and it was just a matter of time before they overtook the other conferred Empire Combat Master Halls. A blessing? Hall Master Xing and Division Head Liao turned their gazes over. Indeed. Think about it, the young man whom Zhuo Qingfeng had brought to the headquarters to participate in the progeny of combat selection, Zheng Yang, is Principal Zhang's direct disciple. Feng Sun nodded in agitation. If Zheng Yang were to clear the progeny of combat selection, that would effectively mean that he is the next head of our entire Combat Master Hall, a powerhouse even when taking the entire Master Teacher continent into consideration. Not to mention, he is also a member of the Xianxian faction. This. Hall Master Xing and the others were taken aback. They had been too focused on the fact that the Xianxian faction was a Tier 1 empire organization that they hadn't considered matters from this perspective yet. Taking a step back, even if he fails the progeny of combat selection, a genius who is qualified to participate in the selection is bound to become an elder of the Combat Master Hall at the very least. With him around, even if our Qingyuan Empire conferred Master Hall were to join the Xianxian faction, who would dare mock us? Feng Sun continued. Hall Master Xing and the others fell into deep thoughts. If one were to look at matters from that perspective, that was indeed the case. Even though the Master Teacher continent viewed seniority with grave importance, what was more important was the heart to learn. No matter how old or senior an individual was, as long as the other party was more skilled than him in a single aspect, it would be worthwhile to learn from the other party. Not to mention, Kong Shi had acknowledged many individuals weaker than him as his teacher and learned from them without a shred of conceit or arrogance too. Since even a man respected as the world's teacher could lower himself, why couldn't others do the same? A willingness to humble oneself to learn should be respected, not ridiculed. What would be truly ridiculous was for one to choose ignorance over knowledge for his own pride. If Shen Yang were to become the progeny of combat, he would inherit the greatest heritage of the Combat Master Hall, and it would only be a matter of time before he became their next Hall Master. Surely there was no shame in joining the organization which the head of the powerful Combat Master Hall was a member of. And even if the other party didn't become the Hall Master, an elder of the powerful Combat Master Hall was still a plenty incredible figure in the Master-Teacher continent. Similarly, it would still be an honor for them to be in the Xianxian faction too. I understand. Having thought things through, Hall Master Xing sighed deeply and nodded. With this, the knot in his heart was finally untangled. Turning to Zhang Xian once more, he couldn't help but feel deep respect. For a man in his 20s to have all of the combat masters choose him over the Qingyuan Empire Combat Master Hall, which had 10,000 years of legacy behind it, he was truly a fearsome figure. His background probably isn't simple either. Hall Master Xing remarked. From what I know, Principal Zhang's teacher goes by the name of Yang Xian, and his cultivation has reached an unfathomable level far beyond our imagination. Feng Sun nodded in response. Yang Xian. Startled, Hall Master Xing widened his eyes slightly. Could it be? Has Hall Master Xing heard of Yang Shi before? I recall hearing such a figure from my teacher before. There's formidable master teacher whom others address as Yang Shi in the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, and his cultivation has achieved an astounding level matched by very few in the long history of the Master Teacher continent. However, I'm not too certain as to whether this Yang Shi's name is Yang Xian or not. Hall Master Xing said. Hall Master Xing's teacher. Do you mean 8-star Combat Master Tong Qianqiu, the man who goes by the nickname of Inferno Adamantine? Division Head Liao asked. Even though Hall Master Xing had never spoken about his heritage, after several centuries of friendship, Division Head Liao was still able to fathom a thing or two. Inferno Adamantine Tong Qianqiu was a formidable combat master renowned even in the Empire Alliance. With his steel fists, he instilled deep fear into his opponents. Once, in a battle, he had single-handedly slain more than several dozen thousand otherworldly demons, thus striking his name out in the Master-Teacher continent. Hall Master Xing nodded. If even Combat Master Tong has spoken such words, that Yang Shi must be truly a formidable figure. If Yang Shi truly is Principal Zhang's teacher, that would explain the latter's incredible capabilities. Under the tutelage of such a formidable master-teacher, he was bound to achieve great things in the future. Feng Sun said. He had originally intended on challenging Zhang Xian once more to cleanse his name, but in this moment, such thoughts had already vanished from his mind. Since it was impossible for him to catch up with the other party no matter what he did, he might as well spare himself from the humiliation. It wasn't a bad thing to set high goals, but a human must understand his own limits. Chapter 1137, Zhang Xian's True Aptitude. Noticing Zhang Xian's confused look, Guild Leader Wan explained, Elder Wei happens to be in the vicinity of Qingyuan City, so she was dispatched here. Just like most other guilds, the headquarters of the Spirit Awakener Guild were located far away from the Qingyuan Empire. Even Saint Five Dan aerial beasts would have to fly for many days before they reached Qingyuan City. It was only due to Elder Wei being in the vicinity that she was able to make it there within 3 days. After explaining the situation to Zhang Xian, Guild Leader Wan turned to Elder Wei and said, Elder Wei, this is the genius whom I told you about earlier, Principal Zhang. The talent he possesses in spirit enchantment is unlike any I have ever seen or heard of. Elder Wei nodded. Turning to Zhang Xian, she said, Guild leader Ruan has already told me about you. Within just a few hours, from knowing nothing at all about spirit enchantment, you successfully enchanted the guild building just by browsing through books. Your aptitude for spirit enchantment is truly frightening. You're too polite. Zhang Xian quickly waved his hand before asking with a perplexed frown, may I know the reason behind Elder Wei's visit? Principal Zhang is indeed a candid person. I am not the type that likes to beat around the bush either, so I'll get straight to the point. Our Spirit Awakener Guild headquarters regard you extremely highly, and we wish to extend our invitation to you to train at our headquarters, Elder Wei said. For a person of her cultivation realm, there was no need for her to dawdle with pleasantries. Train at your headquarters? Zhang Xian was slightly startled for a moment before shaking his head. I believe that guild leader Ruan must have told you that I am a master teacher as well. For me, Spirit Awakener is more of a side occupation, so I don't think I will be devoting too much to furthering my skills in it. If he did not manage to become a 9-star master teacher before he reached 30, his life would be forfeited. Spirit Awakener was a wonderful occupation, but he could not afford to allow his attention to wander at this moment. Furthermore, while it was true that he could advance his cultivation swiftly by tapping into the resources in the Spirit Awakener Guild, there was a catch to it. If he received benefits from the Spirit Awakener Guild, he would have a responsibility to it as well. Give and take, this was how the world worked. The Spirit Awakener Guild would never allow him to shirk off his responsibilities to it after investing resources in him. It was for this reason that Zhang Xian had chosen to slowly advance with his own strength. He didn't want to owe too big of a favor to anyone and end up slowing his advancement as a master teacher and a cultivator. You can resign from being a master teacher. Elder Wei looked at Zhang Xian intently. Her face was impassive, but the sharp glint in her eyes revealed the deep confidence that she had. With the heritage and resources available at our headquarters, as long as someone of your aptitude works diligently, I am confident that you will one day gain control of the Spirit Awakener Mountain and become the Spirit Awakener Sovereign. At such a level, even 9-star master teachers will have to treat you with the utmost respect. Isn't that much better than slowly fumbling your way up as a master teacher? As Spirit Awakening was a support-based occupation, it was inevitable that its fighting prowess was beneath that of the other guilds. However, if one could reach the very top, the potential it wielded was immense. If the young man before her could gain control over their sacred lands and become the Spirit Awakener Sovereign, what was there to be feared of 9-star master teachers? I won't resign as a master teacher, Zhang Xian replied resolutely. That is the primary pursuit of my life. I am interested in learning spirit enchantment as well, but ultimately, it's only a supporting occupation to me. He might have only chosen to become a master teacher out of convenience at the start, but at this point, it had become a lot more than that. Even without his innate fetal poison, he would not have been willing to abandon his identity as a master teacher to become a Spirit Awakener. Elder Wei frowned. There's no need to answer me so quickly, I'll give you a few days to think your decision through. This is a rare opportunity for you to soar to the top. Such a chance won't come again. If it had been anyone else in the young man's stead, he would have surely leaped at her offer. After all, the Spirit Awakener Guild was still one of the more influential powers in the Master Teacher continent. It might not be up to par with behemoths like the Master Teacher Pavilion and the Combat Master Hall, but ordinary guilds couldn't hope to compare to it. Yet, to flatly reject the offer like that. I am thankful for your offer, but my mind is set. There's no need for me to contemplate any further, Zhang Xian replied with a polite smile. He could take Spirit Awakener as his supporting occupation, but there was no way he was going to abandon his main occupation for it. However, it would be disrespectful to the Spirit Awakener Guild, and there was no way Elder Wei was going to accept that for an answer. After all, that would effectively mean that they were devoting their resources to groom a master teacher for the Master Teacher Pavilion. Even though master teachers are the #1 occupation of the continent, the resources to go around are severely limited, and rivalry over them is strife. Reaching 9-star is no easy feat at all. However, as long as you come to the Spirit Awakener Guild, all kinds of valuable resources will be at your disposal. Furthermore, our Spirit Awakener Guild is filled with all kinds of beauties. If you wish for it, you will be able to pick any of them. In fact, if you desire so, you can even enchant any building or weapon that takes your fancy and regard them as your closest mate. Why do you have to make things difficult for yourself? Elder Wei asked with a frown. Zhang Xian shook his head. I have no interest in such shallow pursuits. Back then, the Glacier Plain Court also offered me similar terms, but I rejected them nonetheless. It seemed like the Glacier Plain Court and the Spirit Awakener Guild really had a low opinion of men. It was as if they thought that men were all lecherous individuals who were only interested in their lower body. What a joke! Hu Yaoyao, Zhao Feiwu, and the others were top-notch beauties, and it was not as if he was oblivious to the feelings they had for him. If he truly wanted it, he could have easily kept them by his side. Glacier Plain Court. Elder Wei was taken aback. There were many beauties in the Spirit Awakener Guild, but they were still far from matching the Glacier Plain Court. Most female cultivators in the Glacier Plain Court practiced attribute cultivation techniques, which further accentuated their feminine charms. It was for this reason that most powers in the Master-Teacher continent viewed marrying a disciple of the Glacier Plain Court as a huge honor. Upon learning that the Glacier Plain Court had attempted to recruit the young man before her only to fail, Elder Wei hesitated for a moment before flicking her wrist. A grayish stone appeared on her palm. This spirit gauging stone over here is able to assess one's aptitude as a Spirit Awakener. If your aptitude has reached the 10th level, I can help you apply for more favorable terms with the headquarters. Perhaps, it might even be possible for you to not resign as a Master Teacher. Assess one's aptitude as a Spirit Awakener? Zhang Xian asked. Elder Wei hesitated for a moment before switching to Zhenqi telepathy. That's right. To be honest with you, only one whose aptitude in spirit enchantment has reached the 10th level will stand a chance in successfully enchanting the Spirit Awakener Mountain. However, it's a pity that it has been 5,000 years since such an individual has emerged in our guild. This was a secret of their guild. Considering that it was her first time meeting with the other party, she should not have revealed such deep secrets. However, according to guild leader Ruan, the young man was likely to possess an aptitude of the 10th level. If that truly was the case, she would have to bring him back to the headquarters regardless of the cost. Otherwise, the Spirit Awakener Guild would only continue down its declining spiral and eventually end up being absorbed into the other powers. Even though the Spirit Awakener Guild had many allies to rely upon, they still needed to possess some strength of their own. Otherwise, if they were to grow too reliant on others, the others could use it as leverage against them and gradually control them. Spirit Awakener Mountain. The Spirit Awakener Mountain is an artifact formed naturally by the forces of nature, and it is the greatest trump card of our guild. It's rumored that the mountain is actually a rock mined from a world above ours. Once successfully enchanted, the Spirit Awakener will attain strength on par with 9-star Master Teachers. With that, there will be nothing in the world that could stop them. Elder Wei said with a hint of pride in her voice. It's so formidable. Zhang Xian was astonished. To attain strength on par with 9-star Master Teachers just by successfully enchanting it, that was as good as soaring to the heavens in a single step. On top of that, he would even be able to keep Master Teacher as his main occupation. It would be a lie if he said that he was not moved by this deal. Not to mention, with the vast resources of the Spirit Awakener Guild, he would no longer have to worry about a lack of concentrated high-tier spirit stones and pinnacle spirit stones. Everything would be within his reach. Furthermore, he would be able to access their cultivation technique manuals and compile Heaven's Path Divine Art all the way to St. Nine Dan. Even if he took his time and advanced only a single realm a day, he would still be able to reach the very top of the Master Teacher continent within just a single week, becoming an existence on par with Kong Shi. Alright. Seeing that Zhang Xian was hooked, Elder Wei nodded as she passed the spirit gauging stone over. The test is very simple. Just grasp the stone lightly and silence your mind, and it'll automatically assess your aptitude. Zhang Xian replied with a nod as he took the stone. Placing his hands around it tightly, he closed his eyes. To be honest, he was also interested to find out what his aptitude in spirit enchantment was. As long as he could reach the mark and the other party did not insist on him resigning as a master teacher, he would seriously consider heading to the Spirit Awakener Guild headquarters. Wang. In an instant, he entered the state of heart of tranquil water. A brilliant light burst from the stone clasped in his hands. All right, it's done. A moment later, the light dissipated, and Zhang Xian opened his palm. Elder Wei and guild leader Wan quickly rushed forward to take a look at the stone, and at a single glance, their eyebrows shot up in astonishment. They couldn't help but rub their eyes in disbelief. What's wrong? Seeing the duo reacting in such an exaggerated manner, the bewildered Zhang Xian lowered his gaze to look at the stone as well, and his mouth fell open. How is this possible? On the stone, there was a single number, 3. 3. Does this number mean that my aptitude has only reached the 3rd level? Zhang Xian asked hurriedly. A moment ago, Elder Wei had said that the highest level of aptitude was 10, and given that he possessed capabilities on par with 7-star pinnacle spirit awakeners, even if he wasn't at the 10th level, he should at least be at 7th or 8th. For 3 to appear, what the heck? That's right. It means that your aptitude has only reached the 3rd level, Elder Wei said with twitching lips. After hearing the report, she had personally dropped by the Qingyuan Empire Spirit Awakener Guild to take a look at the guild building. Based on her deductions, the other party's aptitude should, at the very minimum, be at the 9th level. Yet, 3rd level. Wasn't that a little too low? What does this represent? Does it mean that I'm very weak? Zhang Xian asked. This. With a conflicted expression, Elder Wei had no idea how she should speak of this matter to the other party. She paused for a brief moment before pointing to the spirit gauging stone in her hand. This stone possesses spirit of the 4th level. Zhang Xian. Why don't I give it another try then? Fearing that something might have gone wrong, Zhang Xian tried it a few more times. However, the results still remained fixed at 3. Seeing the number that kept appearing relentlessly on the spirit gauging stone, Zhang Xian rubbed his glabella in frustration. He had thought that his talent in spirit enchantment would at least be decent, if not perfect, but to think that he was even worse than a stone. How frustrating. It seemed that the reason he was able to become a spirit awakener so easily, even successfully enchanting the entire guild building, wasn't due to his astounding aptitude in spirit enchantment. Rather, it only meant to say that the Heaven's Path spirit enchantment art was simply too formidable. Elder Wei shook her head bitterly as she stood up. I have imposed myself on Principal Zhang today. I'll be taking my leave now. It might still have been a mistake the first time, but with the same result appearing so many times, she could no longer deceive herself. Not only did Principal Zhang not possess exceptional talent in spirit enchantment, his aptitude was atrociously horrendous. It was most likely due to sheer luck that he had been able to successfully enchant the guild building. She had thought that the Spirit Awakener Guild had finally found its savior, but from the looks of it, how could it be that simple? If a genius with an aptitude of the 10th level could appear that easily, the seat of the guild leader of the Spirit Awakener Guild wouldn't have been empty for the past 5,000 years, leaving them with no choice but to be subordinated to the other powers. There's no need to stand on ceremony, Zhang Xian replied awkwardly. He had been bargaining with the other party a moment ago, but in the end, he was worse than a mere stone. Just recalling what had happened left his face reddening in shame. I will have to ask of Principal Zhang to keep the matters concerning our guild a secret. Sending a telepathic message over, Elder Wei beckoned to guild leader Wan and said, "Let's go." Right when the both of them were about to leave the manor, a crisp voice sounded. Teacher, can I give the spirit gauging stone a try, too? Chapter 1138, Departure. The person who had just spoken was Wang Ying. When Elder Wei and the others entered the room earlier, she and Lu Yang had still been in the midst of cultivating. Since it didn't seem like anything confidential, they didn't excuse themselves. However, when Elder Wei took out the stone, she had felt a tingling sensation in her heart. It was a feeling reminiscent of intimacy. Thus, she could not stop herself from asking for a go. Zhang Xian turned to his student and asked, "You wish to give it a try?" At this moment, Wang Ying's face was completely red, and her body was trembling slightly. "Yes. Somehow, I feel a kind of attraction force between me and the stone." Wang Ying nodded. "Attraction force?" Noting the serious look on Wang Ying's face, Zhang Xian turned to Elder Wei and said, "Elder Wei, I might need to trouble you for this." "It's fine." Elder Wei nodded. With a flick of her finger, the spirit-gauging stone flew toward the young lady, landing accurately in the latter's hand. Without saying anything, Wang Ying placed the stone between her palms before slowly closing her eyes. Wang! A blinding light burst from the stone. It took a while before it dissipated, and a string of numbers slowly floated into appearance. This. Upon seeing the number on the stone, Elder Wei's body jolted. Even Zhang Xian was dumbfounded. How can this be? 2 digits sat quietly on top of the spirit-gauging stone, 11. Didn't you say that the 10th level is the highest level? Why does the result reflect 11? Zhang Xian asked. I have no idea. Elder Wei was bewildered. Based on what she knew, the 10th level was the highest level achievable. Only one who had reached this peak was qualified to enchant the Spirit Awakener Mountain and become the next Spirit Awakener sovereign. For 11 to appear, what did this mean? Suddenly, a thought came to Elder Wei's mind, and she spoke with a quivering voice. "See, could it be, this is the level of aptitude of the founder?" "The level of aptitude of the founder?" Zhang Xian asked in incomprehension. According to the legends, the founder of our Spirit Awakener Guild, known to the world as the Fairy of Spirit Enchantment, possessed an aptitude above 10 in spirit enchantment, reaching a level beyond our imaginations. It's for this reason that she was able to turn an entire mountain into a powerful artifact and enchant it. Back in that era, even Kong Shi was fearful of her. It should have been impossible for an individual as talented as our founder to appear once more, but to think that I would meet such an individual in my lifetime. Elder Wei's breathing hastened as her face flushed crimson. She had originally hoped to find a genius of the 10th level to restore glory to the guild, but to think that she would actually find a genius of the 11th level instead. She could hardly imagine what this represented. As long as they groomed her well, she could potentially become a figure as powerful as their founder. "Young lady, do you wish to follow me back to the Spirit Awakener Guild?" Elder Wei asked anxiously. She had definitely found a treasure this time around. If she could get the other party to return with her, the Spirit Awakener Guild would reach greater heights in the near future, perhaps even ushering another era of greatness for them. Wang Ying had not expected for her aptitude in spirit enchantment to be so great either. Panicked, she could not help but turn to the young man. "Teacher, I'll listen to your will." No matter how good her aptitude in spirit enchantment was, the will of her teacher was much more important. "Principal Zhang." Elder Wei glanced at Zhang Xian anxiously. This. Slightly hesitant, Zhang Xian turned to Wang Ying and said, "Execute a punching routine for me." "Yes." Nodding, Wang Ying swiftly executed an elegant but powerful set of punches. Hoo-la! Her punch tore through the air like a sharp spear, creating a sharp gust of wind. This was a fist art that she had just learned from Zhang Xian, but she had already achieved considerable mastery in it. Who? A book appeared in the Library of Heaven's Path. Zhang Xian placed his finger on it, and the information concerning Wang Ying flowed into his mind. Swiftly looking through it, a frown emerged on his forehead. There was nothing concerning Wang Ying's talent as a spirit awakener inside at all. To be more exact, there was not anything that hinted at it either. Is the Library of Heaven's Path no longer accurate? Zhang Xian was perplexed. The Library of Heaven's Path had reflected information on Zhao Ye's purine body the first time he met her, and the same went for Yuan Tao and Wei Ruyan as well. So, why was Wang Ying's aptitude in spirit enchantment not reflected in her Library of Heaven's Path book? Does the Library of Heaven's Path not reflect acquired constitutions? Back then, Lu Chang's combat soul constitution wasn't reflected in it either, Zhang Xian wondered. Back then, the Library of Heaven's Path did not reflect the reason behind Lu Chang's massive soul. It was only through Mo Hunsheng that he learned of the combat soul constitution and that Lu Chong was suited to learn soul arts. Most likely, the situation was the same with Wang Ying as well. It might not have been an ability she was born with, and perhaps due to certain conditions of the Library of Heaven's Path, it wasn't reflected in it. Wang Ying has a conscientious personality, and she is far more meticulous than any of my other students in deciphering the simplified Heaven's Path divine art that I impart to them. Perhaps it might be the work of her personality and the prowess of the Heaven's Path divine art at work that resulted in a change in her constitution, granting her such talents, Zhang Xian deduced. Fate is not something that is fixed. Not even the massive hands of the heavens are capable of grasping everything. In truth, whether it was Lu Chong or Wang Ying, their talent could only be considered average among countless others in the master-teacher continent. However, despite the deficiencies that fate had given them, they had still ended up meeting Zhang Xian and cultivated the powerful Heaven's Path divine art, thus changing their lives for good. For better or for worse, destiny was a capricious power. Perhaps, even the seemingly omnipotent Library of Heaven's Path was not infallible before the capricious nature of the world. In teaching a student, it's important to assess their talents individually and cultivate their strengths. However, it is also important to assess their growth and make alterations accordingly. There are some who might not show aptitude in a certain craft initially, but a sudden bout of enlightenment could bring about massive growth in their capabilities in the field. When such a situation happens, it wouldn't do to continue viewing them as a weaker student and teaching them as such. A sudden enlightenment sprouted within Zhang Xian's mind. He felt as if he was on the verge of coming onto something important, but when he tried to grasp it, it seemed to elude him. He tried to delve deeper, to grab hold of it, but at that moment, Elder Wei's voice jolted him back to reality. Principal Zhang. Raising his gaze, Zhang Xian saw the middle-aged lady looking at him anxiously. She really wanted to take Wang Ying away, but she could keenly sense the deep relationship between the teacher and student. If the latter was unwilling to go with her, it could create some feelings of aversion between Wang Ying and the Spirit Awakener Guild. Shaking his head, Zhang Xian knew that this wasn't the time for him to be thinking about other matters. Turning back to Wang Ying, he asked, "Are you willing to head to the Spirit Awakener Guild?" In such situations, what was important was not his opinion but his students'. His role was only to help guide the latter along the road of life. Wang Ying frowned in a dilemma. At the Spirit Awakener Guild, you will be entitled to a great pool of cultivation resources and a complete heritage. Naturally, you will also advance much quicker through the ranks. However, even if you choose to follow behind me, I am confident that I'll be able to bring you to the same height eventually. Zhang Xian looked at Wang Ying calmly with deep confidence in his eyes. Heading to the Spirit Awakener Guild was a good opportunity, but even if Wang Ying did not wish to take the opportunity, Zhang Xian was still confident that he could groom her into becoming one of the strongest experts on the master-teacher continent. The ultimate decision lay in the hands of the young lady before him. A deeply conflicted look surfaced on Wang Ying's little face. A moment later, she spoke up meekly. "Teacher, just like Xiaoye, Yuan Tao, and the others, I wish to share your troubles as well. I don't want to continue being a burden to you." If she opted to follow her teacher, she would surely reach incredible heights in the future. In fact, she did not think that the heritage of the Spirit Awakener Guild could compare with her teacher's lectures. But, as her cultivation grew, the resources she required to advance through each realm would increase exponentially. Even though her teacher had never uttered a word of complaint about the matter, she could not bring herself to keep dragging her teacher back. She wanted to become a person worthy of standing beside her teacher to assist him, and not baggage that was dragging him down all the time. If she headed to the Spirit Awakener Guild and became the Spirit Awakener Sovereign, she could gain power swiftly. With her newfound strength, she would be able to help her teacher in his time of need. She had not heard it from Xiaoya herself, but she felt that it was with the same conviction that the latter had made the decision to join the Glacier Plain Court. And the same went for Zhen Yang as well. As the first student his teacher accepted, she could not bring herself to continue selfishly leeching off him. On the other hand, upon hearing Wang Ying's words, Zhang Xian shook his head and sighed. "You are my student, how can you possibly be a burden to me?" They had only been together for a short year, but the experiences that they had gone through together were unforgettable. The bond between them was one that would never be severed. Wang Ying might have thought that she was a burden, but to him, she was family. How could a family member possibly be a burden? Hearing Zhang Xian's words, Wang Ying's eyes reddened. She was silent for a moment before resolution filled her eyes, and she declared, "I want to head to the Spirit Awakener Guild. Teacher, I know that you view me as your family, but it's the same for me as well. This is an opportunity for me to grow and soar into the greater sky. In the past, you have sheltered me from the storm, and now, it should be my turn to protect you. That's because, we are a family." Zhang Xian lowered his head and nodded silently. A long moment later, he said, "Since you have made your decision, go on then. All parties must eventually come to an end." Even though he knew that it was just a matter of time before his students would leave his side, separation was still difficult for him each time. Of his 7 direct disciples, Xiaoya had gone to the Glacier Plain Court, Lu Chong had headed to the ancient domain of Soul Oracles, Yuan Tao had returned to his clan, Wei Ruyan had left for the Poison Hall, and Zhen Yang had departed for the Combat Master Hall headquarters. 5 had already left his side. And now, the 6th was leaving him, too. Of course, Zhang Xian was glad to see that they were grasping the opportunities before them. With these opportunities, he had no doubt that they would reach incredible heights. Just that, the rational mind and the sentimental heart were 2 separate organs in the body. He knew that it was better for them, but such rationality did little to alleviate the sorrow of separation. "Teacher, you must take care of yourself." Kneeling on the ground, Wang Ying spoke hoarsely before making 8 resounding kowtows. Zhang Xian nodded before placing a finger lightly on her forehead. A surge of heaven's path Xinqi flowed into her body. Placing his hands behind his back, Zhang Xian said, "If you meet with any danger in the future, just activate this surge of Xinqi, and I'll know, no matter how far away I am. If anyone dares bully you, even if the other party is the strongest sect on the continent or even the Master Teacher Pavilion itself, I'll definitely redress your grievances." His tone was impassive, but the conviction in his voice was clear for all to hear. Wang Ying nodded as she flashed a smile at Zhang Xian. Zhang Xian turned to Elder Wei and said, "Elder Wei, I'll leave my student to you. I hope that you will treat her properly. If I ever learn that she has suffered the slightest grievance in the Spirit Awakener Guild headquarters, know that I'll visit there personally and demand an explanation." To be threatened by a mere Saint Tu Dan cultivator, it was natural that Elder Wei was unhappy. However, knowing that the other party was standing up for his own student, her heart still softened a little. "Don't worry. Our Spirit Awakener Guild will surely protect her with everything that we have, we won't allow her to suffer the slightest grievance, so you need not worry." For 5,000 years, there had not been a single Spirit Awakener whose aptitude had reached the 10th level. It was not easy for one who possessed an aptitude of the 11th level to appear, so how could they allow anything to happen to her? After all, the future of the Spirit Awakener Guild was at stake over here. That would be for the best. Zhang Xian could tell that there was not any falsehood in the other party's words, and he nodded in satisfaction. Then, he turned around and waved his hand. Since this matter is decided, it would be best for you to leave now. Unlike Zhao Yu's decisiveness, Wang Ying had a soft heart. The longer they delay the matter, the more likely that Wang Ying would hesitate and change her mind. Teacher. How could Wang Ying not understand her teacher's intention? Her body trembled, and tears trickled down her cheeks. Elder Wei walked up to Wang Ying and said, "Let's go." Wang Ying wiped her tears and nodded. Elder Wei then turned to guild leader Wan and instructed, "It would be best for us to return to the headquarters as soon as possible, so we won't be staying tonight." After finding such a genius, it would be safer to escort her back to the headquarters as soon as possible to prevent any mishaps from occurring. Or else, if something really happened on the way, it would be too late for tears. After which, she turned to look at Zhang Xian one last time and said, "Principal Zhang, we'll be taking our leave now." Who? Right after saying those words, Elder Wei drove her Zhenqi and leaped into the sky together with Wang Ying. In the blink of an eye, the both of them had already disappeared over the horizon. The very first student he had accepted ever since transcending over to this world, Wang Ying, had left. A long time later, Zhang Xian let out a deep sigh. Standing quietly on the spot, Zhang Xian felt an unprecedented feeling of loneliness. His students had all nearly left him, and Luo Ruoxin was no longer around either. He couldn't help but feel that it wouldn't be long before he was all alone once more. It was as if he was slowly regressing back into those days of solitude when he first transcended over to this world. Back then, he was under the constant threat of expulsion, and there was not a student under his name. Everything was completely foreign to him, but there was not the slightest support or solace he could find from those around him. They might learn better and stronger cultivation techniques staying by my side, but it's for the best that they have left. Staying by my side will only limit their growth as a person. A growth in cultivation was only a small aspect of life. In order to mature into adults, his students would have to venture into the larger world themselves and experience all kinds of things themselves. As this thought surfaced in his mind, Zhang Xian suddenly felt like he had grasped hold of that elusive thing he had been clawing at earlier. A teacher who truly loves his students would think ahead for them. Grooming a student isn't like forging a weapon, where a forging technique and a blueprint would be sufficient to craft a good weapon. The students have their own life to live. They should experience the many aspects of life themselves, be it joy, anger, sorrow, or bitterness, and they should find their own goal and struggle for it too. If I were to just keep them by my side, all I can offer them is knowledge. They might be able to grow powerful this way as well, but I would be depriving them of an opportunity to temper themselves, and they would never be able to become true experts this way. The fact that they are leaving my side shows that they have already matured. Hong Long. His mind jolted, and a sound reminiscent of the rumbling of thunder echoed in his head. In the next moment, a unique aura abruptly descended from the sky and shrouded his figure. The fourth acknowledgement of Celestial Master Teacher. Tzzzzzzzzzz. That unique energy dived into his body, raising his soul depth swiftly. At the same time, he fell into a trance, and his aura gradually grew deeper and steadier. The Conference Hall of the Combat Master Hall. Hall Master Xing, here is the compilation of the combat knowledge we have learned from the Xianxian faction over the past few days. According to them, they were all imparted from Principal Zhang, the head of the footwork division. Lu Wangqiu took out a few thick books. He had only left to the Xianxian faction to study. It didn't mean that he was never coming back to the Combat Master Hall. Hall Master Xing casually flipped open the first book and began browsing through it. Before long, his eyes lit up in excitement. When he finally browsed through the books and mused over their content, he couldn't help but exclaim, "Principal Zhang is indeed a genius. His understanding of combat has reached an unfathomable level." As simple as these theories may seem, they are directed towards the very crux of cultivation. Through this knowledge, our combat masters will be able to easily find the flaws of any battle technique and overcome them easily. He had never known that combat could be interpreted in such a straightforward and refreshing manner. As expected of Yang Shi's direct disciple, Principal Zhang was truly an incredible figure. Indeed. I was paying close heed when he conducted the lecture earlier during the exchange, and even though the knowledge he had imparted was simple, it was extremely enlightening. I felt that many new windows have opened up for my cultivation just by listening to his lecture, the head of the Palm Division, Yan Qinghai, added. The other division heads also nodded in agreement. If they were still a little opposed to joining the Xianxian faction before, after the exchange they had, such a feeling had vanished entirely. If anything, they would be delighted to join the Xianxian faction at this point. As long as they were to study diligently, they could foresee the overall prowess of the Combat Master Hall increasing by leaps and bounds. It seems like it's the correct decision for us to participate in the exchange. Hall Master Xing nodded in agreement. However, halfway through his words, he suddenly sensed something, and his eyes narrowed in astonishment. Voila! The other division heads seemed to have sensed the same thing that he did as well, and they hurriedly got to their feet. Let's head over to take a look. Without any hesitation, Hall Master Xing dashed out. Not too long later, he arrived at a massive hall located a short distance away from the conference hall. Placed within the hall were the tablets of the outstanding predecessors of the Combat Master Hall, as well as a sculpture of their founder. Upon stepping into the hall, they saw the tablets and the sculpture of their founder trembling non-stop, as if they had witnessed something terrifying. What's going on? The head of the footwork division, Lu Wangqiu, asked in apprehension. This was the first time he had seen such an occurrence in the 800 years of his life. Furthermore, there was no record of something of this sort happening in the long history of their Combat Master Hall. Voila! Just as Hall Master Xing and the other division heads were completely bewildered by the happenings before them, the tablets suddenly fell towards a certain direction. For some reason, their movement seemed to carry a hint of deference and respect. At the same time, the sculpture of the founder also fell to the ground. It was as if it had finally encountered an existence worthy of its respect. This could it be? Upon seeing these happenings, a thought suddenly came to Hall Master Xing's mind, and his eyes narrowed in shock. What is it? The division heads quickly turned their gazes to him. As combat masters devoted their time to furthering their combat skills, they weren't as knowledgeable as the master teachers. It was inevitable that they would be ignorant about the various legends and formalities of the master-teacher pavilion either. Trembling of myriad tokens, the bow of submission of the predecessors. This it is the sign of the birth of a celestial master-teacher. Hall Master Xing said hoarsely, his voice quivering in disbelief. Celestial master-teacher. Those words left the faces of the other division heads paling as well. Lu Ran was a master-teacher apprentice of the Qingyuan Empire Master-Teacher Pavilion. He was in charge of cleaning and organizing the Teacher Acknowledgement Hall. It should have been his rest day today, but the other apprentice on duty had something urgent on, so he could only fill up for him. I have already made an appointment with Luo Yan to meet her parents. Damn it, she'll surely hold a grudge against me for this. Lu Ran muttered in distress. If not for this darn duty, he would have been able to make it for their appointment tonight, and if things go well, he might be able to finally bring the beauty he had been courting back home and officially terminate his long term of singlehood, but due to this darn duty, all of his plans had gone down the drain. The more he thought about this matter, the more frustrated he felt. It's only a bunch of lifeless tokens, is there a need to guard them day in day out? Pushing open the door to the Teacher Acknowledgement Hall, Lu Ran looked at the same barren sight before him and shook his head in frustration. All that was in the Teacher Acknowledgement Hall was a bunch of old tokens and a sculpture of Kong Shi. He understood the need to respect one's ancestors, but those were all lifeless objects. It should suffice to clean them once in a while, surely there should be no need to appoint a guard to specially look over them. Forget it. I just have to endure this for another half a year. Once I am promoted to an official master teacher, I won't have to do such dreary chores anymore. As an ordinary apprentice, it was inevitable that he would be appointed to carry out some menial labor for the master teacher pavilion. However, once he became a true master teacher, his standing would become completely different from before. It was true that a one-star master teacher wasn't anything much in Qingyuan Empire, but a master teacher was still a master teacher. With this identity shielding him, he wouldn't have to live so humbly anymore, being at the beck and call of others. Forget it, I should just have a good sleep here and apologize to Luo Yan tomorrow morning. Stretching his back lazily, Lu Ran headed to a corner of the teacher acknowledge hall and placed a few cushions together before lying down on it. Closing his eyes, he was on the verge of sleeping when he suddenly felt the entire hall tremoring intensely. What? What is going on? Nearly scared of his wits, Lu Ren immediately leaped to his feet in horror. He was in the Master Teacher Pavilion, the most important ground in Qingyuan Empire. There were many formations erected around it, such that even if an earthquake or avalanche were to occur, the Master Teacher Pavilion would still be able to emerge from it completely intact. And yet just what in the world could have happened for such intense tremors to occur? Horrified, he scanned the room warily, only to see the many tokens leaping down from their stands. Upon seeing this sight, Lu Ran's body shuddered in fear. He had never encountered or heard of such a situation before. Those tokens should have been lifeless objects. In the past, when he was cleaning those tokens, he had accidentally knocked down some of them, but it was not as if anything had happened to him. Why would they suddenly come to life, jumping down from their stands? Walala! Falling to the ground, they stood in a neat row, as if filing in on someone's command, and with a simultaneous action, they turned to look in a specific direction. Completely chilled by that eerie sight, Lu Ran hid in the corner, covering his mouth tightly with his trembling hands. He was afraid that if he would be killed if he were to make a move at this moment. Hong Long. Just as he was considering whether he should quietly sneak out of the room to report this matter to the pavilion master, he suddenly saw the unmoving sculpture of Kong Shi coming to life as well. It turned around and looked in the same direction as the tokens. Its eyes were deep and distant, reminiscent to that of a living person. In that instant, Lu Ran even forgot how to breathe. Kong Shi's sculpture slowly lowered its back and clasped its fist. Greetings, my comrade. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.